Hey guys. This is part 4 of What If Naruto was one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 16, Family. Zabuza and each of the remaining swordsmen along with Mei watched in stunned silence as the commander's hands glowed a very bright green. With precision they had never imagined him to possess, Naruto carefully removed the rock shards embedded into Mangetsu's shoulder before sealing the wound. He didn't just stop there, as he even recreated the bone and skin, making the entire thing vanish, as if it never existed in the first place. Haku sobbed in relief when she heard Mangetsu's whisper of peace. She then looked at the focused man who was doing everything in his power to keep the boy amongst the world of living. Why go so far? She couldn't help but ask in a whisper. Naruto looked up even as his hands continued to heal the last of the wound and was surprised to see the entire squad having the very same question in their eyes. He looked back at Mangetsu and thought about the question. As a spy, he was never supposed to reveal the true extent of his powers. Even if he had not revealed everything, he had crossed a line for the boy currently breathing heavily in his arms. For a moment, he saw Nagato's face staring back at him, which made him smile. He looked back at his comrades, and even if the faces were different now, the feeling in his heart still remained the same and was the one which made him realize the answer. Because he's one of us, he answered resolutely. Haku and Mei truly smiled on hearing him say that, but he saw the others who were more battle-hardened were yet to comprehend the full extent of his reasoning. All of us are different in many ways, but we are a team. We are Kiri's finest warriors entrusted with our nation's future, but most importantly all we have right now is each other. We're family, said Naruto, a fierce determination present in his eyes which earned him a soft gaze of understanding from Yuri and Jinpachi. There's no such thing as family, refused Zabuza with a growl, remembering all he had been taught in order to survive. All he had done to survive, including murdering his own classmates in the academy. He couldn't. We are now. He flinched on hearing Naruto's unwavering answer and felt something unfamiliar in his heart on seeing the look in the blonde's fierce gaze. Family always betrays, whispered Kisame hesitantly, memories of his own dark past coming back to haunt him. Naruto lowered his gaze on hearing him say that, knowing a part of it was true considering who he was in reality. He had no right to preach about family to the people he was spying on in the first place. But he had seen the way quite a few of them had given up on Mangetsu so easily when things went south. And as commander he was responsible for the success of the mission. And it would never succeed unless each member of the squad knew that they could rely on their comrades without a doubt. Maybe they will someday, he agreed with Kisame, making the older man look at him with a frown. Then why? He asked seriously. You don't give up on family, no matter what, answered Naruto truthfully, as he looked at Mangetsu. He saw Zabuza and Kisame still didn't agree with his opinion, but they were thinking about what he had said, which was more than enough. Even he couldn't undo years of gruesome training these men had undergone in a few moments, but he had shown them a different path through his actions. Mei watched Naruto gently lift Mangetsu over his shoulder as he stood up and glanced at the rest of the mountain above them with a determined gaze. She looked at Haku, followed by Jinpachi and Yuri. She was pleased to see the same feelings present in each of their gazes. Even Zabuza and Kisame looked a little shaken. She looked back at the man who was winning their trust ever slowly. There was nobody who doubted he was a fine soldier and a good commander, but the way he fought for Mangetsu and put himself on the line had showed them the kind of man he truly was. What's the next move, Commander? Naruto looked back at his squad and was pleased to see a renewed determination burning in their eyes. More importantly, he saw the way most of them wanted to trust him after what he did for one of their own. We climb the rest of this mountain, then establish a makeshift camp and scout the area for more intel. When we have that in place, we strike, instructed the commander. Commander, we cannot afford any more accidents. We are with you, but climbing further exposes us to the same risk that hurt Mangetsu in the first place, warned Haku seriously, earning a nod from the blonde man. I'll carry you all to the top in one shot with my teleportation technique. Considering the height, air pressure, all of your weight and the distance, my chakra will almost get exhausted. If there are enemies waiting for us at the top, I wouldn't be of much help for some time until my chakra level rises again, explained Naruto hesitantly. It's still a better plan than risking each one of us climbing the rest of the way. Besides, you've done more than enough so far for us. We'll have your back up there against anything, promised Haku fiercely. This time there was no hesitation as the entire squad nodded their consent and looked resolutely back at Naruto. He looked at them for a moment before giving an affirmative nod as they then gathered all around him, placing their hands over his backs. Ninja wire on your kunai. Be ready to hit the nearest trees or rocks to create an anchor and use it to establish your position on the top. You'll have 5 seconds to make it happen. Don't miss, he warned them. He could see everyone was a little nervous, but they were committed to the mission and gave their firm nod of consent, which was all he needed to see. When they all looked ready, he expanded his sensory powers and located the highest tri-pronged kunai he had managed to establish across the mountain. Even from that point, it was another 500 feet to the top, one that he would have to cover in a few seconds. It was not going to be easy. Mei only had a moment to blink when she saw Naruto giving a final nod before her entire world squeezed. Words couldn't describe the sensation as she felt her entire self being crushed to the size of a small rock before being pushed through a dark space she could barely see before her eyes widened in horror. Around her, she saw their entire squad had appeared in the air amidst the clouds. She barely had time to admire the clouds before that nauseous feeling took over once again as she saw Naruto throw a sharp object up higher. Again and again they were all violently crushed and pulled until Mei felt herself ready to puke her guts out. Her eyes widened when they suddenly flashed against the edge of the mountain top, and she realized this was the moment they had all been waiting for. Despite their claims of pulling their weight once they reached the top, the entire squad was extremely disoriented from the rapid travel. It was hard enough to breathe and even more harder not to just puke your guts out from that horrible nausea. Naruto must have anticipated this event, as another clone of him appeared above them all and threw a single 3-pronged kunai that embedded itself into the nearest rock with a solid grip. Mei again felt that nauseous sensation, and before she knew it, every one of them was safely back on the ground with the faint puff of the clone disappearing echoing from behind them. She looked up to see Naruto taking a few deep breaths as his Sage Mode power suddenly vanished, and without a word, he collapsed unconscious to the ground. Commander! 3 weeks later, Kirigakure, Ino silently stared at the short clip in her hand. She had been looking at it for a good long 5 minutes now, and even then her eyes were not willing to tear themselves away from the 2 positive signs displayed on the medical device. It was not as if she had not imagined this event never happening in her life. Every woman at least thought about this once in her life. Her feelings on this subject at the present were conflicted, to say the least. She needed a second opinion, one that was more rational and could help her look at the bigger picture, because even if she appeared calm on the outside, she was having a crisis in her heart. One which she didn't want her commander standing in front of her to notice. "This is bad," whispered Tsukumo, the acting leader of all Konoha agents in the Land of Water. He flinched on his inappropriate choice of words when he received a scathing glare from one of his most prized operatives. The raw hatred that came in her eyes scared him to the point that he raised his hands in a placating manner. "Any word from him yet?" asked Tsukumo, trying to change the subject if only for his own safety. "No," she whispered, her sadness and fears easy for him to see. "He's the father, isn't he?" asked Tsukumo gently. Any other woman would have been offended on hearing such an intimate question being asked, but in their line of work, it was not unusual for operatives to use sex as a weapon against their targets to get the information they needed. Naruto and Ino were no different to this rule. Although Tsukumo was pleased when she nodded her confirmation to his question of Naruto being the father. Naruto was a good man and a good ninja, but he thought from the heart, unlike Ino, who had a better sense of understanding. He doubted the last Namikaze would be capable enough of raising a child considering his own dark past and the nature of their current assignment, much less the child of another man. Even if they both denied it, Tsukumo knew these two loved each other. It was not a love born of pure passion or lust, although that might still exist. In reality, it was a love born from their shared pain, sense of duty, and respect they had for each other. "I'm scared, Tsukumo," she whispered. He stepped beside her and placed his hand over her shoulder in a comforting manner. "Whatever your decision, I will make sure the Hokage and the higher-ups accept it. I will not let them have their say in this." He promised fiercely, and he meant it. If that young brat Hiruzen and his advisors didn't heed his advice, then they would know how bad it was in reality to piss of a group of special ops ninjas. Granted, there were not that many of them in existence to stage any decent revolt, but they were a small group that looked out for each other, even if it meant making those in leaderships get their heads in the right place. His promise served to dismiss most of Ino's fears, The fact that she hugged him and sobbed in relief showed no matter their training, operatives could get compromised if feelings got involved, which was the case with her and Naruto clearly. "I take it this means you are not dropping the child?" he asked in a fatherly tone, adding as much warmth to ease her fears. "Not my choice, but," she whispered, and Tsukumo knew exactly what terrified her the most. She was scared of Naruto and what he would do with this change in their lives. In one way, it could bolster their cover and embed them deeper into Kirigaku's society. Many opportunistic clans had been trying to get their daughters married off to Naruto ever since they discovered him to be the last survivor of the Namake's clan. They didn't even care that he was already married to Ino, citing Kirigaku's lax laws that allowed ninja clan heads to have multiple wives for the sake of the clan. It was a hypocritical law, but one accepted by the government, and upheld by the water daimyo who practiced it himself with his multiple consorts. It was only Naruto's evasion of this entire matter that kept those clans at bay, especially the Kage. With this child, many of those people would be forced to take a step back. Many would still try, but Naruto could argue he had started doing his part by repopulating the Namake's clan. It also allowed Konoha more leverage over Naruto. Maybe with this they could make him switch his loyalty to their village instead of Yuzu. Their village needed a powerful ninja like Naruto, and the prospect of the Namake's clan being reborn in Konoha would add strength to their village's military. Although that created a big problem in the present for Tsukumo. "What will you do now? I doubt his covert mission will get over any time soon, and the more you wait," he warned her hesitantly. "I will not make a decision without informing him," she objected fiercely. She could not do that to him, not after everything he had lost. He trusted her with his life and more. The very least she could do was wait for him to return so they could both decide on what was the right course of action. "Then you need to resign from the Umbu group weeding out the spies of various nations in Kiri's ranks," said Tsukumo seriously. "No, Ino, Tsukumo, they are not to be underestimated." "Have you forgotten what they have done in the past 3 weeks alone?" asked Ino fiercely. Tsukumo flinched. The Umbu commander had formed a special team that was investigating every branch of Kiri's military for possible spies. Nobody was spared, no matter what clan, rank, or political connection they had. The spies from Konoha had so far been kept well protected from the lens thanks to Ino being a part of that team and diverting their attention to other spies. They had already found spies from Iwagakure and Sunagakure. The former had been working as a medic and the latter had been working as a secretary in the Mizukage tower. Suffice to say, both of them were executed after brutal torture and interrogation at the hands of the Umbu unit supervised by their commander. It didn't stop there, as the same unit then hunted down and executed entire families, friends, even few acquaintances associated with those two spies from IWA and Suna. The fact that they even killed the IWA Kunoichi's 4-year-old son in cold blood made their goals very clear. It was an absolute purge and nobody was going to be spared. As a person, Tsukumo was worried for Ino and her safety. Even more now that he knew she was pregnant with a child. It was not safe for her to hang around those trigger-happy monsters. On the other hand, the commander inside him knew how vital an asset she was. Without her misguiding the Umbu forces, their spies could be exposed. And she knew that. "No matter the situation, I am still Ino Yamanaka of the Leaf," she promised him, the loyalty and determination in her fierce blue eyes making him swell with pride. "I cannot step aside and risk the lives of my comrades, not if I have the power to save them. I have to stay on that unit to keep you all safe," she pointed out, earning a tired sigh from him. "They are dangerous men, Ino. Don't ever forget that. If something happens to you and this child," warned Tsukumo, "they won't do anything to me, for they know Naruto will burn them in the deepest fires of hell if they even tried to lay a finger on me. Considering the way the Mizukage favors Naruto, he would be the first one to protect me should my loyalty ever be questioned by the Umbu unit," explained Ino rationally. Tsukumo couldn't deny the merits in her argument. By now, Naruto had established a small cult-like status for himself in Kirigakure. Most of the civilian population loved him, and the shinobi respected him. The fact that the Mizukage considered him one of the candidates to succeed him in the future showed how well Yuzu's spy had embedded himself into this society. Everyone had seen a glimpse of Naruto's power. Even the Umbu commander would think 1,000 times before accusing Naruto's own wife to be a spy, much less take any action against her. But there were still a lot of dangers and he didn't like it. In the end, he chose what was best for their group and hoped he didn't come to regret it later. "Fine, I'll leave what to do with this child to you and Naruto. You can continue to be part of the Umbu team investigating the spies, but also continue reporting everything to me. Even if you feel paranoid about something, I want to know everything, instructed Tsukumo seriously. I understand. Thank you, said Ino with a relieved smile, but frowned when she saw Tsukumo massaged his forehead with a tired sigh. I don't think you do, not all of it. It's true you are relatively safe and Kiri won't question your loyalty without sufficient proof, but if anything did happen to you, then Naruto knows about most of our spies, including me. He left it at that, hoping she would understand what he was hinting at, and she did instantly. He would never betray his village or Konoha. We are allies, objected Ino, taking personal offense that her superior would even suggest such a thing, not after all Naruto had done for them his entire life. Tsukumo just stared at her calmly. It would seem she didn't know Naruto's full history. It was why she could not see what Tsukumo and the other higher-ups could. It gave them great nightmares every once in a while just thinking about it. Tsukumo respected Naruto, or he should say Minato, which was the young man's true birth name. He hadn't come across any ninja in his life that had sacrificed so much for their village and still keep fighting for it. There was no question about his courage, skill, or loyalty. But the man had seen too much, lost everything until Ino came into his life. Naruto had walked the path of darkness for a very long time, and no matter how strong an operative, there always came a breaking point. Tsukumo prayed he would never have to see such a day, as that would be his worst nightmare. Operatives like Naruto were the shadows that kept the peace in this world, but could also very well become the ghosts that started another war. He did not reveal his feelings or information about the man to Ino though, as she would not understand. Instead, he warned her to be careful and left her house already deciding on assigning an extra pair of eyes to watch over her and do what was needed if she was ever exposed. Tobirama had been very clear on that. Tsukumo looked at the dark sky and couldn't help but wonder how difficult a life in the shadows always was. Land of Lightning, Naruto sat atop his tree branch in the thick forest atop the mountain. Heavy rains continued to fall down from the skies as he looked at his other squad mate hiding in an adjacent tree in a similar position. Both of them were neatly camouflaged and not visible to the naked eye. They had also suppressed their chakra signatures to a minimum so as not to get detected by the enemy. Zabuza did not like what he was witnessing. Almost every member of their squad sans Mangetsu who was recovering had joined Naruto in their daily recon missions in order to estimate the enemy's strength, as well as the exact location of their target. Let's reconcile our findings, suggested Naruto in a whisper, earning a nod from his partner. There are around 4 castles in the immediate vicinity guarded by nearly 2,000 to 3,000 enemy forces. They are spread out equally, and there is a large no-man's land between each of the castles and their approaching roads. It's almost impossible to sneak inside undetected considering the detection barriers, regular patrols. Even if we somehow get past all of that, we still don't know the exact location of our target. Our interrogation of few patrol officers didn't reveal any fruitful insight on the same, recited Zabuza meticulously with a heavy frown. They had been careful to alter the memories of those they had interrogated in order to keep their cover, and had just sent them back to their duties to prevent any further suspicion. The enemy was already on high alert since they had discovered the silence from their border patrols beneath the mountain and had tightened their security. We could go for an aerial insertion, but we'll get detected right away. And if we land in the wrong castle where the target is absent, we lose our only chance of doing our job. You were not kidding when you meant this was a suicide mission, muttered Zabuza with a scoff. The mission still stands, pointed Naruto, earning a low growl of frustration from his partner. I know that. I just don't see how we can get past them all to reach our target without raising any alarm, argued Zabuza with a tired sigh. Naruto accepted his partner's analysis even as he took out a lone cigarette from his pouch and ignited it with ease. As he took in the first puff of smoke that relaxed him greatly, he saw Zabuza staring at him petulantly. With a faint grin, he produced another one of his reserve cigarettes and tossed it to Zabuza, who gave him a shark-like grin in return. They both smoked in silence for a few minutes as they pondered over their dilemma. Even Naruto was at a loss for ideas. The harsh truth was that they would be detected if they tried to infiltrate through stealth. That would make them lose what little advantage they had and put his entire team on the risk of annihilation. There was only one way left now. We split up into 2 teams. Team 1 made up of 3 members acting as diversion unit that will draw majority of the enemy's forces by getting into a deliberate fight with the border patrols. Team 2 made up of 4 members will use the chaos to sneak behind enemy lines, It would be easier to detect the target in this chaos, as the security forces tried to safeguard the VIP and his family into the most heavily fortified place, suggested Naruto. It's risky, but I don't see any other choice. Team 1 should be made up of our strongest fighters, as they will be under a lot of pressure, even risk getting eliminated first. Team 2 should be made up of those of us more adept at stealth and quickness to seek and destroy the target, pointed Zabuza. He looked at his leader and saw in those intelligent eyes that the blonde man had already decided who would take part in which operation, but his silence was enough to show he wanted Zabuza to arrive at his own conclusion as well. I think, Kisame, you and Mei should be Team 1. The three of you are the heavy hitters of our team, the rest of us can sneak in and destroy the target along with his family. But if we commit the entire team to this plan, there is no one left as backup to rescue us or send word of our capture in worst case. We would be dead or worse by the time our village sends reinforcements, if they ever do. It's already been more than stipulated time than what we planned, warned Zabuza seriously. That's a risk we will have to take. We have come too far just to turn back and go home now, decided Naruto, as he finished his smoke, and it seemed Zabuza also had enough of the same, as they both quickly destroyed their cigarettes to ash and let it get absorbed in the atmosphere. In that case, let's go and brief the others. They won't like it, suggested Zabuza, as he got up from his perch. You go ahead and finish briefing them on the plan. I'll erase any trace of our presence here, ordered Naruto strictly. Zabuza nodded before he vanished into a puff of smoke, which Naruto dispersed quickly before focusing on the enemy stronghold. In truth, he was not sure of his plan but had limited options to complete the mission. He could not give up now when he was the one who pushed for this mission in the first place to the Mizukage. What made him curious was the fact that he had received intel about this hideout area directly from Yuzu's network. Of course, they had routed it through Kiri's spies located in the Land of Lightning to dispose any suspicion, but had informed Naruto of their development on this matter. As far as he was aware, Yuzu had very limited presence of their agents in the Land of Lightning, and he doubted any of them were entrenched well enough to locate the secret hideout of the daimyo during a time of war. It could only be possible if someone within the daimyo's circle betrayed him. But who? He whispered out loud. He tensed and immediately unleashed the sword placed at his back, turning around only to come face to face with the female kunoichi standing at a few treetops away from him. She was wearing a light gray-colored full-sleeve shirt covered by a similar-colored flak jacket complemented by dark black pants and combat boots. There was a standard katana placed at her back and a small pouch for kunai and shuriken strapped at her thighs. Her face was covered behind a black mask similar to an umbu, while the Kumo headband was wrapped around her left arm protectively. Her bright red hair were neatly tied in a bun atop her head, and her calm violet eyes looked at him without any surprise or alarm. He swiftly fired one of his three-pronged kunai in her direction, and in less than 3 seconds he flashed right above her with his sword ready to slice her head off, only for her to be ready for such an attack as she had raised her katana in a defensive stance. Their weapons clashed in a mighty blow as several sparks flew in the cold night. He narrowed his eyes when he saw the playful mirth visible in her gaze before she disengaged from their duel and jumped away to another tree. He was about to follow through with his attack when he suddenly froze. She had removed her pitch-black face mask and was now looking at him with a mixture of joy and sadness. If there was any doubt in his heart, it was removed when she clenched her fist and thumped it against her chest while standing at full attention. Most people would not understand this gesture, but he did. For he had been the one to create this salute. A tradition he had passed on to only a select few people in this world, and she had been one of them. It's been a while, Captain Minato. Chapter 17, Spartan. He stared at the woman standing before him, his heart unable to believe her to be real. For the last 10 years, she had been a ghost that had haunted his heart. A whisper in his dreams, a reminder of what he had lost. She was an S, just like him. A Spartan. The only one apart from him who probably survived the massacre nearly 10 years ago. Kushina? He whispered in disbelief and faint hope in his shaky voice. He remembered a young teenage girl, almost the same age as him with a fiery temper. She had never been one of the heavy hitters, but her skill with fuinjutsu, sensory ability, and booby traps surpassed his own by many degrees. Her healing prowess had been the best among all Spartans, even better than his own. Most importantly, she could completely suppress her chakra, making her invisible to any sensor ninjas, even him. Ghost. That had been her codename among the Spartans, whom the world commonly knew as the S-program ninjas. Only the Uzumaki knew what the full form of that program truly was apart from the ones in it. Not even Konoha knew much about them, and only discovered the truth after Hashirama's rescue at the hands of the Spartans. 99, she replied back with a faint smile, confirming her unique number among the company's size former Spartan unit of more than 120 ninjas. 47, he confirmed back his own unique number, earning a faint nod of acknowledgement from her. He found himself hopping through trees as she did the same before they both met in a fierce embrace in the dark forest bombarded by heavy rains. A lone tear fell from his eye, followed by a relieved chuckle as he hugged her more tightly across his chest, a part of him afraid of her vanishing if he let go of her. Kushina felt the same as she returned his fierce and passionate hug, as memories of their past threatened to overwhelm her emotions. Only her training and years of isolation prevented her from tearing up, but she could not resist leaning back from the hug a few moments later to lower his face mask and kiss him passionately. She felt his surprise on that gesture and his clear hesitance, but he made no move to stop her. She broke the kiss soon after, knowing he was probably overwhelmed. After all, nobody expected him to remain composed if his former partner/girlfriend was revealed to be alive after nearly 10 years of that massacre. "How?" he whispered, still looking surprised. She gave him a nod of consent, making him activate his red eyes once more, the sight of which brought back a lot of memories for her. A moment later, he saw the answer to his question in her memories. Flashback. 10 years ago, Kushina groaned in pain as she aimlessly stared at the pitch-black sky above her shrouded by dark clouds. The heavy silence around her bore painfully over her heart, as did the sight of the corpses of her fellow Spartans laid around her. Her only solace was the sight of hundreds of Kumogakure ninja mixed among the dead, which was enough proof of the valiant fight the Spartans put up. However, in the end it was not ninja that decimated the special ops forces of Yuzu. She gave the most hateful glare to the monstrous two tails raging a few kilometers away from her, and the one who sent her comrades to their graves. If not for that beast, this battlefield would have been the grave of Kumogakure's entire force. The bastards had seen how outmatched they were, and the casualties they suffered at the hands of the Spartans forced them to bring their weapons of mass destruction to the front lines in order to defeat similar weapons launched by Yuzu. Spartans. She had been barely able to heal the large hole in her stomach courtesy of the rocks that had been launched at them by the tailed beast. Some of her ribs were still broken and would take time to heal, but she would probably survive. Her comrades weren't so lucky. She smiled on hearing the tailed beast scream and made herself at peace when she saw a dark/yellow flash attacking the monster. "We leave the rest to you, Captain." They all had kept the promise they had made to their leader until the very end. Now it was time to rest. They had done their duty. She lay in the blood-soaked ground, but before she could resign herself to the approaching darkness, she saw the severed head of Echo just a few feet away from her. Anger surged through Kushina as she remembered Echo had been one of the youngest of their group. A boy of 12. Now he was just a severed head lacking the rest of his body, with his eyes still wide open and looking at her. Kushina stared into those lifeless eyes and couldn't help but feel they were demanding something from her. She looked around at the corpses of her other comrades and felt the same feeling magnify in her heart. Justice. Her comrades were dead, her village had suffered, her clan had went through so much death and pain. Her gaze landed upon a dead Kumogakure Jounin, more specifically at the headband wrapped around his forehead. Once again, she had a purpose again as she dragged herself to the cover of the nearby forest, where she found more corpses of the enemy left behind by her comrades. Most of the enemy force had used the tailed beast as a diversion, and used its power to escape the wrath of the Spartans. Kushina identified a badly mutilated corpse of a young Kumogakure female kunoichi of Chunin rank. They were both of the same age and body build, even had the same colored hair. She switched her uniform with the dead girls, and with the little sensory power she had left, she located the retreating enemy forces and made her decision. She looked back at the battlefield to see the tailed beast screaming in agony, as Minato butchered it without any shred of mercy in his heart. For a moment, she hesitated, knowing Minato would need her, especially now that Nagato was dead. But then she saw the other Spartans who lay dead on the battlefield and knew she had to avenge them. She doubted the Mizukage would reform their unit ever again. The village had undergone quite a scandal when their unit was formed, with many people not comfortable with the brutality the children who survived the program had endured during training, and so many others dead in the process. It was only the resounding military victories that the Spartans brought for the village later in the war that made their people accept their existence, and grudgingly acknowledge the Mizukage's decision. Most of all, Kushina felt that Kumogakure would not be deterred even if they lost this war. They would probably stir up more wars in the future once again. A ninja village was only as strong as the support it received from the feudal lord, the daimyo. If there was to be any peace in this world, any justice for her dead comrades, she had to make the man responsible for this entire war pay for his crimes in blood. And she could never achieve all of that if she returned back home. She looked back at Minato knowing her decision would end the future they could ever have, a future she had dearly desired for a long time. It would haunt her till her last breath. But she was a Spartan first, just like him. Family, duty, honor. Those were their clan's words, and Kushina believed in them with all her heart. The Spartans had been her family, and it was her duty to honor their sacrifice by getting them justice. Tears fell from her eyes as she turned around and slowly limped in the direction of the retreating enemy forces. Flashback end. Kushina carefully gauged his reaction as he finished witnessing her memories and the choice she had made on that fateful night. Over the years, she had imagined a variety of reactions from him on learning the truth, but never had she expected a calm nod, albeit with some sadness in his eyes. "You did what you thought was right," he whispered sadly. "You don't resent me for leaving you behind? Nearly going rogue?" she asked carefully, but he shook his head. "We are not kids anymore, Kushina. You were right, the Spartans were gone after that night. Even with the two of us, our unit would never be resurrected. Although it was dangerous, it was best that you went after the ones responsible for the death of our friends. I doubt the villagers would be kind to you if you had returned with me while all the others perished," he explained with a nod of acknowledgement sent towards her. She had also shown him memories of her infiltrating Kumo's military and working her way towards the royal court of the daimyo over the past decade. She had re-established contact with Yuzu's intelligence command when she was settled. They had been furious but couldn't forego the benefit of having a highly skilled Spartan among their arch-enemy's top ranks. Their decision to not punish her worked in their favor as she gave them critical intel over the years that helped save many lives, including the one of Tobirama Senju. She was a part of the Umbu team from Kumo tasked with protecting the Lightning Daimyo and his family. They were privy to a lot of confidential information that the Reikage reported to his feudal lord by examining his letters for security before passing them to the feudal lord or attending their private meetings as part of the daimyo's security detail, as the feudal lord was intimidated by the fearsome Reikage. When she had learned of Tobirama's survival and captivity, she had passed that intel to Yuzu. They had been very careful and had actually used Kiri's eagerness for war to make Minato convince them to attack the Land of Lightning. It was for the best, as Tobirama was relatively safe, although now a prisoner of Kiri, but she had faith that Minato would get the man back to his village somehow. If it had been Konoha or Yuzu forces attacking the city of Osaka, then the Land of Lightning would know for sure that there was a spy hidden in their top ranks. But since it had been Kiri who attacked, it was just brushed off as an unexpected collateral damage. Even now, she had been the one to reveal the daimyo's secret hideout but had not expected such a small team to be assigned for the job. She had observed Minato and the other swordsmen from Kiri. While there was no doubt they were powerful, but the odds were stacked against them. It was why she stepped in to help, and for the fact that she had to meet the man she had loved all those years ago. Maybe a part of her still did, but she doubted whether he felt the same. It had been nearly 10 years. "What you did was at least better than trying to commit suicide like I did," he excused with a miserable laugh. Kushina was truly saddened on hearing him say that. She had known about what he had been up to all these years. That had been one of her conditions in exchange for vital information to Yuzu, as apart from her feelings for him, he was also the only Spartan still alive. Both of them were a dying breed, and she wanted to look after one of her own in whatever way she could. The village shouldn't have ostracized and blamed you like they did. "You did the best you could," said Kushina honestly, earning a surprised look from him. "You know?" he asked with a shocked stare, making her give a hesitant nod. "I kept tabs on you." "Sorry," she whispered sheepishly, making him sigh. "You're such a nerd, you know that." Kushina's eyebrows twitched on hearing that blasted nickname he had given her. He had caught her peeping on him taking a bath once, and suddenly she deserved that name. She was about to respond back with her own retort when she saw him staring at her happily with a smile. "I'm glad you are alive, Kushina." She hugged him once again before both of them settled on one of the treetops after doing a scan of the area for any intruders. Fortunately, they found none. Kushina doubted any could get past her sensory abilities. The closest enemy presence was nearly 3 kilometers away. Naruto stared at his former comrade and could not help but be relieved. Her survival lifted a great burden off his shoulders, for it proved he didn't get all of his men killed. The fact that she was a close friend made him feel a lot better, knowing she was there to help him with this mission even further bolstered his confidence in his ability to get the job done. "What happened to you, Minato?" she asked gently, knowing he would understand her question was directly related to the reasoning behind his attempt to commit suicide. What had happened to the Spartans was a tragedy of the highest order. The fact that his little brother, who was his last family, also died on that battlefield was heartbreaking. But they were Spartans, they were supposed to fight till the end. But he nearly gave up and she wanted to understand why. "Watched my friends die, my Nagato die. You think that would be the worst part," he whispered sadly, as tears pulled up in his eyes as memories of that fateful night came rushing back. Kushina grasped his hand with her own, knowing exactly what the Spartans were to him. It was the same with her. "But you didn't die," realized Kushina sadly, as she understood he had wanted to die alongside his men. Instead, he was left all alone. She had heard that he had visited the families of each of the Spartans, even those who were orphans. For them, he went to their respective orphanages and talked to anyone who knew or cared about those lost young children. He would have seen their devastation and pain with his own eyes, experienced their anger and their hate for him to have survived while their loved ones didn't. Even after everything he had been through in his life, Minato had stood strong, but in the end he was also human, and that pain was too much for a 14-year-old boy. "I hope they remember you," said Kushina with a fierce determination in her eyes, for this man had endured so much for their people his entire life and would continue to until his end. His eyes widened on hearing her words, and when he looked in her eyes, he saw nothing but pure respect and admiration for him. As someone who could relate to him better than anyone in this world, her words were his salvation from the past. "What if we lose again?" he asked in a trembling voice, his worst fears unable to remain hidden from her. She gave him the most peaceful smile he had ever seen in his entire life. "Then we'll do that together too." He leaned in and captured her lips with his own, pouring all the gratitude he felt for her. He remembered the days he had spent squabbling with her, getting on her nerves, the days when she visited his parents' graves with him, the night he took her out for their first date, and the moment of midnight when he had first kissed her, all their training and missions, him telling her about his dream of having a family of their own someday, the way she had blushed and whispered that she wanted the same thing. The life they could have had. Tears fell from Kushina's eyes as she knew how long she had waited for this moment, all the years she had spent blaming herself for leaving him behind, and now knowing what he went through, she wanted nothing more than to hold him in her arms and keep him away from all the pain in this world. To fill his heart with happiness, to make him live the peace he deserved. To fulfill his dream of having a family of his own, a dream that she desired as well. When he finally broke the kiss, she just stared into his blue eyes. Till the end? He couldn't help but remember the first time he had heard that promise. Flashback, nearly 15 years ago, he gingerly opened his eyes only to find himself floating in water. Before panic could overtake him, he realized he was still breathing and there was something stuffed down his mouth down to his chest. It was a tube which was probably giving him oxygen. He looked around and found himself in a tube full of water with various cables attached to different parts of his naked body. Gazing out further, he saw there were hundreds of such similar tubes all around him. All full of young children and a handful teenagers, boys and girls as naked as him. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw his little brother floating in a tube just beside him. Judging from the rise and fall of his chest meant he was alive but asleep. Almost everyone else in the tubes was in a similar state, which left him alone. He tried to close his eyes and go back to sleep, knowing there was no going back, and he was the one that chose this path, which made Nagato follow in his footsteps despite his stern opposition. But his brother was anything but stubborn. He was quite surprised when he heard a faint muffle. He frantically looked around until his gaze found a naked and thin redhead girl floating in one of the tubes near him. Her eyes were looking at him, and as both their gazes met, he saw the same resolve that was in his heart prevalent in her eyes as well. He titled his head in confusion when she extended her small hand outwards in her tube, making water swirl until it was vaguely forming something. Kushina. A feeling of happiness washed over him as he realized she was telling him what her name was, and if that faint grin on her face was any indication, she wanted to be a friend. He easily twisted the water inside his own tube until it crudely displayed his own name to her. Minato. She nodded at him slightly, and used her hands to again write something which warmed his heart. "You'll stay with me?" If not for his shinobi training, he would have panicked and died from claustrophobia on seeing where he was trapped currently. It had the makings of a horror tale, and any sane person would desire not to be alone in this nightmare. Even he was glad that there was someone awake right now like him, as he didn't want to imagine how he would have felt if everybody else had been asleep and he had been alone. He bobbed his head a little, indicating his consent to her request. She again used her hands to write a message that struck something deep inside of him. Till the end? They all had signed their agreements, which saved the village from any responsibility if anything happened to them during this training. They had virtually all signed their own death warrants, and that was not something anybody could ever forget, especially young children. They were all alone out here, cut off from their families, experimented on by people they didn't know. Possibly they would even die in these secret labs without ever feeling the sunlight or seeing their village or loved ones again. It was a somber thought. He would never let Nagato experience that loneliness, as he would be there for his little brother until there was a single breath inside of him. He looked at all the other children and knew they all wanted to protect Yuzu just like him, and had risked it all to protect their village. He would be there for them too, if they ever needed him. He looked at Kushina and thumped his hand against his chest right over his heart, even as the water twisted to his will, forming the words she wanted to hear. Their promise. Till the end. Kushina smiled truly as she mirrored him by thumping her hand over her heart, vowing to uphold the same promise. Few days later, in a dark room, a young boy screamed. He thrashed against the straps and metal clamps holding his arms and legs as the tubes attached to his body pumped the dreaded fluids into him. The pain was all-consuming. Words couldn't describe how it felt to feel each and every bone inside your body hardening and becoming more stronger with every passing second. The feeling of eyesight suddenly becoming twice as sharp, your ears slowly being able to pick up more subtle sounds previously unheard of. The sensation of each and every chakra pore inside your body activating at the same time and glow like 1,000 suns. The horror of watching your body change in height, weight, and shape right before your very eyes as two strangers dressed in white lab coats observed you from a safe room in front of you. If he focused more, he could hear similar screams coming from nearby labs where he knew more children his age were undergoing the same pain. The thought of his brother being put through this, terrified and alone strapped to a metallic bed. No! Doctor, this boy, he heard the male lab coat whisper in awe, even as Minato's struggle against the restraints binding him intensified. Remarkable. His sight, sense of hearing, reflexes and strength have increased nearly thrice against an average shinobi. It's as if his body was made to accept these genetic modifications. None of the other subjects have shown so much potential, said the female redhead doctor, as she looked directly at him. Maybe it's because of the Uchiha and Senju DNA inside of him. His chakra levels were already more than most Chunin even before the surgery. Now he's becoming the super soldier our village needs, commented the male lab assistant. It better. We have already lost nearly 50% of the subjects during the genetic enhancement surgery, said the female head doctor disappointedly. Horror engulfed his heart as he heard what these people just said. He remembered being surrounded by nearly 300 young children these past few days. They were undergoing intense physical training, special warfare lessons, mathematics, geography, and combat medical procedures. Each and every one of them had shown great potential, including Nagato and Kushina, who were the closest thing he had to a family. He was on friendly terms with the other kids as well. Now half of them were dead. He was no stranger to death, but this news was a devastating shock, but one which served to make his will to save his brother even more prominent. He could feel his chakra reserves increasing, his bones' strength magnifying as his body underwent drastic changes. Apparently, this resistance was not something the scientists had not thought about, as binding seals were quickly applied across his body, sapping off large portions of his energy. He collapsed to the bed completely exhausted, his breathing heavy as the female doctor finally stepped into the room and appeared beside him. Your anger reminds me of the tales of the nine-tailed fox's rage. But you did well today, 47, she said calmly, without any guilt or sadness in her voice, even if her surgeries killed nearly half of his comrades. Most of all, these scientists never called any of them by their names, but only by the code numbers each of them were given. It was probably their way of distancing themselves from the fact that they were experimenting on and killing children. My brother, he groaned in pain and desperation, survived. He's also a remarkable specimen, and will do wonders in the future. Rest for now, 47, because when you wake up, you will be Fox. She gave him that name out of her twisted and despicable sense of humor, but he didn't care. All that mattered was that his brother had survived. Kushina would have as well. He felt darkness approaching and swore he would not let the sacrifice of those who died today go in vain. In the end, It was Kushina's words that he remembered even as darkness took him. Till the end. Few months later, Captain Reika Uzumaki stood alongside her group of elite jounin and skilled chunin guarding Tsukushima Hill near their village's coastal borders. They had been ordered to defend this hilltop specifically by the Mizukage and had been told to expect an attack from friendly forces. Apparently, this was to be live fire training exercise with a new unit of their village. The fact that deadly force had been authorized was enough to make anyone's doubt disappear. "Captain, we are ready," reported her second-in-command, squad leader Matsuo. Reika observed the map in her hand. The base of the mountain was a simple grass field a few kilometers inland from the sea. Apart from placing 2 squads on the seacoast as lookouts, she had established twin trench lines at the base of the hill followed by heavily fortified foxholes at various strategic locations in the hill, all the way to the top. She didn't expect their fellow allies to make this exercise a piece of cake, but she doubted they could win. "Rumors say we might be going up against the S," whispered Matsuo hesitantly, his voice only audible enough for her to hear unlike the rest of their forces nearby. Reika pondered over her second's suggestion. Her small company was considered one of the best and most disciplined military units of their village. But they, like other shinobi, had been aware that the Mizukage had taken a lot of young children for the sake of a special program. A program with the objective of making super soldiers who could safeguard Yuzu's interests under any circumstances and against all odds. Captain Reika didn't doubt those kids would be undergoing horrific training, experiments even. She had been one of the minority who objected to this program. What good were the shinobi of their village if their little children were forced to become killing machines? But the higher-ups had won, and the program had started. She could only hope something good could come out of this entire disaster. "Stay alert. Whatever the enemy may be, S or otherwise, it is our job to defend this hill, and we will defend it," confirmed Reika in her ironclad voice, making the younger man straighten up and offer a respectful nod. Just then, one of their runners responsible for maintaining communication active between the patrol squads on the sea coast and the trench lines came running towards them. Reika narrowed her eyes on seeing the panic in the man's eyes. "Report," she commanded. "We have lost contact with our patrols near the sea," reported the man hurriedly, and with some hesitance. She immediately took out her magnifying glass from her back pocket and knelt nearby the hilltop. Zooming in, she focused on the twin trench lines at the bottom of the hill and stiffened when a wall of dark smoke began to charge from the lost sea lines towards the trenches. She frowned when she saw how thick the incoming smoke was and horror gripped her heart. "Take cover!" Her booming voice was barely heard by the troops in the trenches before the smoke suddenly ignited, sending a crushing shockwave that sent each ninja in the first trench line sailing away. The second line had seen the fate of their comrades and were barely able to duck, and were starting to get buried under the dust and dirt that flied everywhere. The fires raged wildly across the open field between the trench lines and the sea. It was then that she heard a whistling sound, and her eyes widened when she saw great fireballs sailing through the sky right towards the last remaining trench line. The fires in the battlefield died down, and Reika caught a first glimpse of her enemy. The first one she saw was a young teenager wearing a dark black full-sleeved shirt and same-colored pants complemented by similar shade of combat boots. To her surprise, he was wearing a similar colored armor with faint blue lines. His entire face was covered by a full-fledged gas mask and his eyes were protected by combat glasses. He looked to be heavily armed with twin swords at his back, several pouches containing explosives, kunai, shuriken, smoke bombs, and even medical kits attached across his vest. All of these equipment gave him a lethal edge over her lightly armed company of ninjas. But that also made him more slower. However, in the cover of the night he looked absolutely dangerous. More and more of similarly dressed troops appeared on the horizon until Reika saw they were a full company size. More than 120. Her gaze immediately caught sight of the only one that looked different in the entire enemy force. He was dressed in similar gear, with the only difference being he was wearing a full white-sleeved shirt under his black-colored armor. Rest of his gear was the same as his comrades. Reika couldn't help but have a feeling he was the commander of these invaders. She flinched when the fireballs that were previously sailing towards the second trench line crashed and made her troops again seek cover, while few tried to deflect the attacks with water-style defensive moves. Her gut feeling was proven correct when she saw the operative wearing a white-sleeved shirt make a few unfamiliar hand signs that were keenly watched by his entire company. Reika cursed when one of the operatives stepped forward surrounded by a platoon-sized group. He immediately unleashed that dark smoke from his body that surged towards her fortified foxholes across the hill, while his comrades unleashed giant fireballs in the sky that sailed forward and rained dangerously close to the second trench line where those of her troops that were not knocked out of the fight were still trying to hold on. It was then the enemy commander unleashed his sword and charged forward. Reika gasped when most of his force followed after him, while the smoke-releasing ninja and his platoon continued to provide suppressing fire over the trench line with fireballs and obscuring the vision of the troops over the hill with the same smoke. But her source of astonishment was not their advance itself, but the sheer speed. Nobody that heavily armed and armored could move that fast, but if her estimation was any correct, then each of those soldiers was charging in at nearly 50 kilometers per hour. Sensors, pinpoint their locations. The rest of you stop that advance, she yelled furiously. Her trench troops and those across the hill were pinned by enemy tactics. That only left her with those present at the hilltop to counterattack. They understood the gravity of the situation and quickly got to work. Within seconds, their sensor-based ninjas gave the exact coordinates of the charging enemy, making a small squad of Jounin step forward. Together, they unleashed a storm of kunai and explosives in the air that rushed towards the charging enemy force. 10 of them leapt high into the air, higher than any shinobi ever could, and unleashed destructive gusts of wind and fireballs that neutralized the attack by Reika's troops completely. In the meantime, the rest of the attacking force had broken through the first neutralized trench line and jumped across the second one. Her disarrayed troops soon came face to face in close-quarter combat. Reika would never forget the sight of watching a full-fledged Jounin get sent sailing away by the punch of a mere teenager. Another's fist was caught by a female enemy kunoichi, and with a flick she made the entire arm twist at painful angles. The enemy commander himself punched 2 of her Jounin into unconsciousness within 3 seconds. Meanwhile, the artillery group that had stayed in the rear had now shifted their attack across the positions over the hill, while their main force finished neutralizing the Yuzu shinobi in the trench lines with ease. Despite her best efforts, Reika could only watch position after position fall under few minutes until she and her small group of ninjas on the hilltop were all that were left of her force. Her only solace being the fact that none of her ninjas were killed. Some were more injured than others, but nothing a few days of medical care could not solve. She didn't want to imagine their fate if these shinobi had been real enemies instead of allies practicing in a planned exercise. Having seen firsthand how fast, strong, and sharp these troops were along with their war strategies and their perfect sense of coordination, Reika surrendered with her men instead of getting into any more dangerous fights with these troops. Her decision was accepted with a firm nod from the enemy commander before he planted a black flag having 2 swords sewn against each other in the dark fabric over the hilltop. The enemy commander then touched one of his troops and whispered, much to Reika's surprise, in a very young boy's voice. "Captain Fox to base, hilltop secured under 15 minutes. "How copy?" asked the now identified captain. He must have received the response he wanted as he nodded in silence before turning back towards her. Reika was unable to hide her surprise or her respect for these soldiers. Not even the best Jounin from Yuzu could have accomplished what they had in such little time without any single casualty. "How many such exercises have you been through?" she couldn't help but ask, making the enemy commander look at her. "Just this one." Reika could not help but be left speechless, and the same feeling was present on the faces of her men as well as they stared at these young kids in a new light. "You're lying," accused one of the Chunin. "That is your opinion. We told you the fact that your leader asked for, that's all," finished the enemy captain, leaving little room for further questioning. He then turned towards Reika only to thump his right hand turned into a firm fist against his chest right over his heart. His troops followed suit and mimicked the action, making her realize it was their own version of a salute. Reika and her men slowly got back on their feet, and when she offered a traditional salute in response, her men followed suit. "Apologies if we were a little rough," said the enemy commander frankly. Reika chuckled in disbelief at those words, looking at the groaning and moaning ninjas around her and those below the hill in the trenches. Rough would be an understatement, but he was right, as this force only incapacitated her troops instead of dealing any permanent damage. "What's the name of your unit, Captain?" she asked with a faint smile. She watched as the entire enemy force vanished in a perfect shunshin, leaving behind their leader, who looked back at the Yuzu shinobi, and Reika had a feeling he was smiling behind that mask. The single-worded answer he gave made her smile, and would send shivers down the world in the future. Flashback End. Chapter 18. No Mercy. One day later, Land of Lightning. Naruto gave a satisfied nod to himself as he stared at the pitch-black night sky above him. The weather had turned extremely cold, with the temperature dropping several degrees and visibility being greatly reduced. It was a testament to the unpredictable nature of these hills. It reduced their operational efficiency, but the same applied to the enemy as well. He looked at his squad and saw them finishing their final preparations. Kisame and Mei were carrying as many small arms they could, considering they would be joining him in their diversion, while the rest of the team infiltrated the enemy castle in hopes of killing the Lightning Daimyo, his entire family and his top aides who had also taken refuge in this safe zone. It would be a crippling blow to the Land of Lightning, which could possibly also spark a civil war with other royals starting fighting among each other to become the next daimyo. That would be the end of their nation, as their enemies would pounce on that opportunity and destroy them completely. Thanks to Kushina, he now knew exactly where his target was located and a less risky route they could use to infiltrate the location. It was only because of his former Spartan comrade that he felt quite confident in their chance of victory. The White Castle. The Lightning Daimyo, his top aides and the man's family had taken up residence in the castle made of precious stones and marbles. It was because of the daimyo's wife's insistence to be near the hot springs inside the castle in this brutish weather. The daimyo was sympathetic to his family's condition, as he had dragged them to this location for their safety, and wanted to make them comfortable. If only that man had cared about the misery he had brought across the world. He looked at Zabuza, Haku, Amuri, Jinpachi and Mangetsu, who would be the infiltrating team. They were trying to carry only their most essential gear to comply with their objective of making a swift strike and an even more faster exfiltration. The commander walked towards the Mizukage's son, an action that was noticed by the younger boy, who straightened up and gave him a confident smile. Naruto saw gratitude and growing loyalty for himself in those eyes ever since Mangetsu learned what the commander had done to save his life. The same admiring gaze reminding him of another boy he had known once. He beckoned the Hozuki heir to follow him as they both stepped outside the cave which had become the base of operations of their squad. "How is your shoulder?" asked Naruto. "Much better. I am fit for duty, Commander," came the confident reply, earning a nod from the lone Namikaze. "Led your team well. They will be counting on you," advised Naruto, earning a hesitant look from the younger ninja. "I still think you should choose someone else," whispered Mangetsu, which made Naruto smile a little. "Have faith in yourself. You know what's at stake and you value the life of your comrades. Trust your instincts," reassured Naruto, as he gently patted the boy's shoulder. "How do you decide what is the right choice, Commander?" asked Mangetsu curiously, for as long as he could remember this man standing before him had made choices that always achieved victory. "Every ninja makes a gamble with each mission. You make choices hoping them to be the right ones, but in truth nobody can foretell the outcome, not you or your team. Your true mettle is tested when your decision turns out to be the wrong one. What you do then decides whether you win or lose, live or die, are remembered as victors or the defeated," explained Naruto with a fleeting smile, as he imparted the wisdom taught to him by his own trainers in the Spartan program when he had asked a similar question years ago on being nominated to be the leader. "I'll try my best then," promised Mangetsu with a thankful nod. "Trust yourself and your comrades. If shit hits the fan, never lose hope and continue fighting in order to find a way out, because anything else is sentencing yourself and your team to death. And finally, I have your back," promised Naruto without hesitation. Mangetsu smiled and gave a firm salute in return for the wisdom. When Naruto turned back towards the cave, he saw the rest of the squad was also ready and had been listening to their conversation. In each of their eyes, he saw the resolve of a determined ninja. He stabbed one of his three-pronged kunai at the entrance of that cave and passed each member of his team one of those special weapons as well. "If you're in danger, just drop the kunai and I'll be there," he instructed. The team nodded resolutely as he steeled himself. He wished he could be there to personally end the daimyo's life, but knew his talents would be required to keep the Kinkaku and other forces engaged away from the infiltration team. Kushina would be diverting all the forces inside the White Castle to allow Mangetsu's team to reach their target within record time and minimum resistance. She had orders from Naruto to bug out before the Kiri team carried out their mission, as they would try to kill her if she got in their way. He remembered her cocky smile at that remark, challenging them to try if they were that bold. "The Land of Lightning is a dangerous nation whose ambition grows each day," he stated with conviction. His team listened to him attentively, and he knew his words would play a key part in their own resolve to see this mission through. Their corrupt and power-hungry leaders want to have everything. They would not rest until Kirigakure is brought to its knees and subject to their dominance, said Naruto falsely. In truth, the Lightning Daimyo was more interested to conquer the Land of Fire and the Land of Whirlpools, according to Kushina. The man had little to no interest in the less developed and resource-deprived Land of Water. But these shinobi didn't need to know that. We are here to stop that from happening, he declared, earning stern and merciless nods from everyone in their group. His eyes turned red and he could feel the simmering thirst for revenge flaring alive inside his heart. For his father. For his mother. For his brother. For his friends and comrades. For all that he lost. He turned towards the cave's exit as all the anger and bloodlust hidden deep inside of him called for justice. Today, we take the fight to their land, their people, their blood. Mei silently watched the forwardmost enemy base. Her fist clenched in anger as she saw few Kumogakure shinobi were indulging themselves to drinks around a man-made fire with others harassing a young teenage girl who looked terrified as hell. There were other sentries that stood guard across the base, and she could see a makeshift headquarters where most of the officers and troops were resting. She flinched when one of the jounin tore the young girl's shirt off, earning an anguished cry from the child. Bastards! She cursed. Kisame remained silent and as unaffected as ever, which made her glance at the last member of their squad whose eyes showed he had seen it all and worse. Wait till you see it all, what a man can do to another, whispered Naruto. Mei shivered on hearing those dark words said with a grim conviction of a warrior who had probably seen many gruesome events in his life. How many are there? Asked Kisame, speaking for the first time. 240 to 250. It's a forward base, answered Naruto, as he used his sensory powers to make the assessment. Enough for everyone then, grinned Kisame with a shark-like look on his face. Mei remained silent on that comment, and instead saw Naruto get up from his perch on the tree only to expertly grab his now feared three-pronged kunai in each hand. His red eyes became even more brighter, and his bloodlust started to rise. It was as if she was seeing him enter a sort of new battle mode. Unknown to her, Naruto's body was undergoing rapid changes. He could feel huge adrenaline pumping through his veins, his eyesight became extremely clear even in the dark night, he could feel all his muscles getting more stronger along with his hearing becoming deadly accurate, all thanks to the chemicals and genetic enhancements inside of him. It had been years since he had fully activated his gifts from the Spartan program. It was all he had left when the bastards had taken everything else from him. Kill them all and make as much noise as you can. That should attract the attention of the other forces and draw them here, which will make the infiltration team's task a tad bit easier, instructed the commander. Finally, some much-needed action, agreed Kisame without fear. Naruto looked at Mei and was quite surprised to see her giving him a firm nod. Her resolve to do her duty was unwavering, something for which his respect for her increased. With nothing more left to be said, the lone Namikaze jumped down to the ground with his squad mates landing right beside him with a barely audible sound. Let's go. His focus narrowed down greatly as he kicked his legs into action. Without waiting for his comrades, he unleashed his topmost running speed of 50 kilometers per hour and surged through the forest like a flash of lightning shrouded in darkness. His red eyes having already zeroed down on his first set of targets with ease. Water style, water bullets. The heads of the two sentry guards exploded as the sudden attack came out of the dark forest and hit them straight across the temple and thereby punching clean through their brain. Even as the bodies started to fall back to the ground, Naruto had already jumped high in the air and far above the makeshift earthen wall across the enemy base. He instinctively dived towards the enemy group stacked near the fire, and his twin kunai were soon buried into the throats of the first two jounin. Ignoring the painful looks of the dying men, he mercilessly twisted the weapons out of their slashed open throats, and went ahead to stab them again into the heads of the remaining two drunk and surprised jounin beside the fire. The bodies of the sentry guards hit the ground at the exact same time as those around the fire faced the same fate. He then heard two distinct sets of screams. Turning back, he saw the civilian girl who was previously being molested and abused was screaming in horror, watching the fate of her tormentor. Mei had joined the battle, and her first act had been to drown the child abuser jounin in a rain of molten lava that the Kiri kunoichi had spewed from her mouth. The Terumi clan heir did not look affected in the slightest, even as her attack made the enemy ninja melt before her very eyes. Her stern gaze then turned towards the civilian girl, whom she signaled to run away, an order which was instantly obeyed. Other forces across the base had been alerted by those screams, and they were soon coming out of the temporary earth-like building. Naruto twisted his kunai backwards and was about to intercept them when someone took action even before him. Kairokyu. A faint reddish-colored gas was unleashed in a dangerous tidal wave that swept through the entire enemy base. At first, Naruto thought it to be smoke deployed as a diversion, but was quite shocked when he saw all of the enemy troops getting caught in the gas storm. Their screams rankled his own nerves as the men and women discovered this gas attack to be poisonous in nature, as at first it was their skin that melted away, followed by their bones turning hollow, their eyes popping out of their faces until they all finally dissolved into a disgusting pool of rotten flesh and vaporizing blood. Kisame had barely managed to reach the battlefield when he came to witness the carnage that had been inflicted upon the enemy so swiftly by the Jinchuriki. It was over. Damn, was all the Hoshigaki warrior could whisper. Mei never flinched even as she watched the destruction she had unleashed. It was only the beginning of a gruesome and dangerous fight. One which she had to see through till the end, for the sake of her nation. A cold chill passed through her entire body suddenly even as she shivered in silence. Her alert gaze caught sight of the dark clouds again shrouding the moon, rendering the lands in darkness. The air turned painfully cold as a foul aura started to taint the nature around them. Foul, chakra, those bastards! There were only a few moments in her life when Mei had truly heard the voice of the beast sealed inside of her. She froze in her tracks as she heard his faint whisper that echoed inside her mind. It was outraged. Something's coming, whispered Kisame, as he stepped beside Mei and raised his sword in anticipation. They both saw Naruto quickly gesturing them towards his position and quickly followed the order. As the three of them took up position behind one of the last standing tents inside the now ruined base, they saw the serious look in their leader's eyes. Mei, on my command unleash your full power, instructed Naruto. Are you sure? She asked hesitantly, earning a grave nod in return. You must, if any of us are to survive, warned Naruto gravely, as he turned towards Kisame. They are coming. Kisame grimaced on hearing that warning, even if his senses had already warned him of the approaching danger moments earlier. Judging from the way how alert and cautious the commander looked, something bad was coming their way. Don't try to fight them on your own or with brute force, you will die, warned Naruto frankly. It was something in the commander's gaze that didn't allow Kisame to dismiss that warning lightly and instead give a firm nod of acceptance. Manji formation. Instantly, the three of them took up their respective position with Naruto facing the front and Mei alongside Kisame watching their flanks and rear. At Naruto's nod, Kisame performed a set of hand seals quickly. Hidden mist jutsu. Mei nervously gulped as a thick cloud of mist enveloped the entire area, rendering nearly any normal shinobi blind. However, both her and Kisame were taught to fight even in such mists, while Naruto was an ex-Anbu Black Ops fighter. Masks on. Follow my lead and don't break the formation. Swords up front. Lace them with chakra. Kisame followed the orders without question as he covered his face with his Anbu mask even as Mei followed suit. Both fighters raised their swords and surged their chakra through their weapons, giving them a more sharper edge to cut through flesh and armor. They saw Naruto picking up a sword from one of the dead enemy ninjas nearby. With his own existing blade, he now held two swords in his hands. His familiar ash form of chakra emerged from his body and effortlessly started to spread across the mist so subtly that one couldn't even see it with their naked eyes. The same dangerous power also traveled across the length of the twin swords in Naruto's hands and soon enough ignited fire across the metallic blades. Even from their distance, Mei could feel the scorching heat of those burning blades and how desperate they were to cut and burn through the flesh of its enemies. She blinked when something moved across the mist on her flank, her gaze searching for that presence desperately even as sinister growls and cannibalistic roars echoed across the entire area. Did you guys see? A silent scream never managed to escape her lips as the ground beneath her feet burst open to unleash a hideous creature that roared. Before she knew it, Mei felt a bone-crushing fist colliding with her jaw that rankled each and every fiber in her body horribly as she was sent sailing upwards in the sky. Kisame snarled and twisted backwards to combat the enemy, and shivered as he felt another shadow flicker behind him instantly. All he saw was the gaze of a monster before he too found himself kicked dozens of feet away. Naruto grimaced as his comrades were slammed away and the two enemies that did it now roared at him. They were just as he remembered. Before him stood two humanoid monsters with chakra as foul as a tailed beast and the killing intent of one as well. Their mad and malice-full hollow gaze a stark proof of the humanity they had forsaken for the sake of this tainted power. The only ones to ever pose a moral threat to his life. And the ones who played a hand in his brother's death. A cold gust of wind blew once more for a fleeting moment, followed by two anguished screams as a flash happened across the mist. The foul chakra started to fade as the corrupted twin enemies glanced back in the direction of the shadow that flew by them just a brief flicker before. Their eyes widened in shock when they saw a pair of familiar and haunting red eyes staring at them hatefully from behind that masked face. Spartan! They fell to the dirt with that last whisper as the wound across their chest spread fire across their entire hideous form, turning them into charred meat in a flash. Naruto felt his fists shaking with uncontrollable bloodlust as the mist in the area was forcefully dissipated by powerful winds. The skies were shrouded completely by dark clouds, rendering the earth into eternal darkness. In that nothingness, he saw 6 pair of red eyes emerging from the forest all around the ruined enemy base. The creatures were humanoid in form, and their entire body was covered in malicious and foul chakra. Their menacing number of tails swirling behind their respective backs a stark proof of each of their individual power. Their demonic eyes having lost all humanity, and their gaping maws hungry to devour their prey to its bone. Mei coughed up blood even as she tried to pick herself back up on her feet after that brutal and sudden attack on her. Even now, her head was spinning and her vision was blurry. Her jaw felt as if someone had set it on fire. Thankfully, Kisame appeared beside her and helped her in the process while nursing his own wounds. Together, they both stared at the approaching enemies from the forest around the ruined base. "Mei, is that Biju chakra?" asked Kisame grimly, his own hesitation and fear easy for her to see. She looked at the incoming monsters, and judging from how outraged the beast inside of her was, Kisame's observation was true. Now I understand why the Kinkaku are feared across the entire world as the most dangerous special ops unit. Their skill as ninjas was already threatening. To imagine them having the power of the Biju inside of them, whispered Mei worriedly. Kumo only has 2-tailed beasts. How are they all having that power within them? Asked Kisame hesitantly, unsure of the fact that the answer he would receive could be something he would like. Most likely, their village must have experimented on them and made them worthy enough to be compatible with this power. Jinchuriki are weapons of mass destruction, but they are limited to the number of tailed beasts a village possesses. Kumogakure circled around that limit by creating an entire force of ninjas capable of wielding Biju chakra, making them all half Jinchuriki in their own right. While they do not possess all the chakra a Jinchuriki has, they have enough inside of them to make them each a mortal danger to us all, explained Mei. As if their luck wasn't already bad enough, she and Kisame suddenly heard hundreds of angry roars echoing all around the forest. Moments later, she saw large amounts of Kumogakure ninja ranging from Jounin, Anbu, Chunin and royal guards of the daimyo bursting inside the ruined base one after another, even as the Kinkaku unit remained behind in the shadows. Both of them were surprised when Naruto appeared beside them in a flash and looked at them seriously. "Leave the Kinkaku to me. Watch my back by handling the others." Mei was about to oppose that suicidal decision, but was stopped when Kisame placed a restraining hand upon her shoulder. Both men were looking into each other's eyes as an untold message was passed, with Naruto then turning towards the army that stood in his way towards the Kinkaku. "He'll create an opening and we'll follow. Understood?" asked Kisame with a calm expression. "Very well," she agreed reluctantly. Naruto narrowed his gaze when he felt Kisame unleash his entire killing intent, making dozens of enemies take several steps backwards in fear. Their morale was further crushed when foul red-colored chakra started covering Mei's entire body until 2 large tails reared their menacing visage from her back. Her green eyes turned a shade more darker, giving her a demon-like appearance in the darkness. Her hair flowed freely in the air and her features became more cannibalistic. He looked back at the front and straight in the direction of the Kinkaku force waiting in the shadows. He was pleased to see them emerging from the rear and marched towards the front after Mei's reveal. But they were stopped in their tracks when the ground beneath their feet started shaking alarmingly. The air became more heavier and foul, making it difficult to breathe, and every warrior felt a crushing bloodlust invade all around them. Now, Mei watched Naruto disappear in a flash before he suddenly appeared high in the air above the first ranks of the enemy forces. She remembered him spreading his dark chakra across the entire area even before the fight began. Ash release, particle annihilation, bone-chilling screaming erupted among the frontline enemy units as a raging inferno was suddenly produced all around them, courtesy of the hidden and twisted chakra igniting itself on its master's behest. Even as 6 men and women burned to death, spreading chaos and fear among the enemy ranks, the carnage was far from over. Naruto quickly performed the tiger, dog and rat seals without hesitation. Zansho Bunshin, after-image clones, he landed back on the ground, now surrounded by a dozen look-alikes of him, and together they stormed through the disarrayed enemy ranks. Adrenaline pumped through his veins at an alarming rate as time itself seemed to have slowed down. The first opponent barely noticed him before his head was knocked off from his body. His clones charged in alongside him, creating chaos among the enemy ranks, Using that to his advantage, he decided to unleash the ability he was feared for. The captain of the daimyo's royal guards saw this enemy appearing at multiple locations, striking down so many of his men one after another. All his troops ever saw was a last yellow flash before they met their end. The few suicidal enough tried to take this demon down by blowing themselves up in their dying moments, but the enemy had already disappeared by that time, leaving behind an after-image clone that harmlessly absorbed the suicidal attacks while its master moved to a different target. Naruto ducked in order to avoid a horizontal slash of a sword from decapitating him, even as another twin set of enemies tried to sweep his legs out. They howled in pain when their legs crashed against his own, only to feel their own bones get crushed against his genetically enhanced ones. The last thing they saw was the red-eyed masked demon plunging his flaming swords into their skulls. In less than a minute, the captain of the daimyo's royal guards saw more than half of his men be killed, with the rest falling back, creating the risk of a full-scale retreat. Realizing the impending debacle, the captain used a quick shunshin and appeared right between the dangerous enemy who was about to murder another one of his men. Steel clashed against steel as their swords met in fiery clash. Fire raged against lightning as the two opposing elemental chakra powering each of those weapons raged for dominance. "What are you?" he asked furiously, for this man was no ordinary shinobi. His eyes widened when the dreaded ash-like energy again erupted from the blonde demon's body and rained down directly over him and those fighters nearby. "Death," answered the monster. Once again another group of men, including the daimyo's royal guards leader, screamed as the ash-like chakra shrouding them ignited, setting them all on fire. Even as the tortured enemy soldiers collapsed to the ground, writhing in agony and their impending death, Naruto marched forward. His eyes fixed upon a group of monsters that stared back at him with equal hatred in their own eyes. He stepped before them, finally covered in the blood of their fellow countrymen, and his flaming swords etching for more carnage. From the corner of his eyes, he saw more and more shinobi forces converging towards their location from all around the forest, but also witnessed Mei along with Kisame move together in order to intercept them. He smiled a little on seeing that, as it was a stark proof of their trust in him to deal with the Kinkaku and their obedience to follow his orders to the core. The last Spartan, cold red eyes of his glared murderously at that familiar voice as the tall and muscular blond man walked forward to join the battle. He was wearing a standard Kumogakure flak jacket that was black on the edges and wore it over a purple, high-collared sleeveless uniform. A purple-colored headband of his village protected his forehead, and similar colored wristbands could be seen upon his hands. His right arm had the word gold etched into his skin permanently. He carried with him one of the most powerful weapons of their world, one said to have been used by the Sage of Six Paths himself. The Bashozen. Kinkaku, whispered Naruto with barely constrained hatred. The leader of Kumogakure's most elite Black Ops unit grinned at him savagely, even as he wickedly glanced at the carnage Naruto had left in his path. "We thought you committed suicide after your village announced that story after your pathetic defeat at our hands all those years ago," mocked Kinkaku, even as he lifted his prized war fan above his shoulder. "I will not die until I kill every last one of you," promised Naruto without hesitation. Kinkaku laughed as he patted one of his special ops soldiers beside him while pointing at Naruto. "Now that's a real monster. They don't make more like us anymore," commented Kinkaku proudly. "Then you won't mind if I make you all disappear," answered Naruto with a cold smirk of his own. "Try to make this interesting before you die," mocked Kinkaku, as dark red chakra enveloped his entire body with 9 tails springing from his back. Naruto twisted his swords till he was holding them completely backwards, even as his ash-like chakra hovered all around him. Those cold red eyes of his saw Kinkaku, and his entire force unleashed their full power as they charged at him. He remembered that fateful night and the cold corpses of his friends, his comrades, his men, and his brother. The ground shook as he charged forth at the approaching enemies without any fear in his heart. The fateful battle had finally arrived. The White Castle, Mangetsu and his team silently ran within the shadows of the royal castle in order to conceal their movements. Their task became a tad bit easier with majority of the forces from this castle and the ones nearby had rushed off to stop the diversionary attack created by Naruto's team. Still, a sizable enemy force remained behind, and it was up to him to deal with them. He held up a fist and made his team take an abrupt halt as a group of royal guards rushed outside of the corridor in front of them. Mangetsu barely had a moment to think before he realized they were about to take a turn straight in the direction of his team, destroying the stealth they had carefully maintained for so long. He gave the signal. A dozen water bullets were released by him, which soon pierced the legs of the enemy group, making them grunt in pain as they started falling to the ground, but were soon engulfed and lightning strikes being unleashed by Amuri. Jinpachi unleashed his sword, which was attached to a ninja wire, and instantly pierced the throats of the struggling soldiers, rendering them incapable of creating any further noise. He then went a step forward and pulled them all back towards Mangetsu's group, where Zabuza quickly sealed the now dead corpses into a scroll before effortlessly placing it on his hip with a savage grin. Mangetsu looked at his team and saw Amuri had already erased the bloodstains on the carpet with her water style, while Jinpachi had sealed away the now useless weapons of the dead enemies, leaving no trace behind of any conflict. He nodded at his comrades respectfully, and earned the same gesture in return. Even as they continued their game of hide and seek with occasional contact with surprised enemies, Mangetsu could not help but wonder they were all working much better as a team thanks to the trust they now had in each other. A trust which one man had built in each of them through his own leadership. He never wanted to disappoint those eyes again. It was why he didn't hesitate in eliminating the Umbu detail posted outside their target's chamber. Either did he flinch when his comrades smashed the door open only to see the daimyo's wife trying to shield her 5 children. He heard Zabuza growl as he raised his sword, making the woman beg for mercy and the children scream in terror. He saw no mercy in Jinpachi or Amuri's eyes. It was part of the mission. But something inside of Mangetsu hesitated as he looked into those eyes of the terrified children and the broken mother. He could only imagine their horror at being surrounded by unknown enemies, their guards dead, and the daimyo nowhere nearby to protect them. "I'll do it." He raised a single-hand seal, and in an instant the royal children fell unconscious. Before their mother could scream in horror, she grunted in pain and saw Mangetsu had appeared before her and stabbed his sword clean through her heart. He touched her chest as his chakra invaded her body, taking control over her entire nervous system, thereby preventing her from dying instantly. "Where is your husband?" asked Mangetsu seriously, but the woman glared at him defiantly even as she groaned in agony. Her resolve, however, broke instantly when Amuri threatened to throw a kunai at the woman's youngest child, a girl of 8. His guards must have taken him outside of this castle via the tunnel in the basement. "That's all I know," she whispered in a broken voice, knowing she may have just condemned her husband and lead her to the same fate as hers. She looked into Mangetsu's merciless eyes, and with the last of her strength, she whispered, "Please spare my children." Mangetsu lost his grip over her chest on hearing those words. She fell backwards towards her grand bed with those last words, her corpse turning the once white sheets red with her blood. Mangetsu saw all the sleeping children getting soaked in their mother's lifeblood and knew he would never be able to forget this night. But the mission was far from over. The children prompted Zabuza in a cold voice, making Mangetsu clench his fists. "We can do it if it's difficult for you," offered Amuri diplomatically. "Better hurry up. Reinforcements are coming," warned Jinpachi, who was now watching the door and the entire corridor. The Hozuki heir closed his eyes as he removed 5 needles from the pouch at his hip and quickly stabbed each child with it, starting with the oldest teenager to the youngest girl of 8. He saw each of them moan in their sleep before being silenced forever as the poison silently spread across their bodies and gave them a quick death. He looked at the 6 corpses in front of him for a very long moment as he tried to accept what he had just done. "Kami." He looked back to see Haku arriving at the doorstep only to witness the results of his action. Her eyes met his own and she didn't miss the pain and guilt burning inside of him. He had murdered people before, men and women. But never children. "The daimyo's advisors?" asked Zabuza seriously, drawing Haku's attention back towards the task they had asked her to finish. "It's done," answered the Yuki clan Kunoichi with a grim nod. "The daimyo?" asked Jinpachi hopefully, only to receive a negative answer from Haku. "It's strange he left his family behind to save his own life, but then again he's a politician. Those cowards," muttered Amuri with a frown. "We find him and end this once and for all." The entire squad looked at Mangetsu as he gave that order, and even the older members among them saw his firm resolve to see that objective through. Haku had known him since they were children, and she didn't miss that something inside of him had changed tonight. As he walked past her, she placed a comforting hand over his shoulder, making him look in her eyes. "Someday this war will end and it will be worth it," she tried to comfort him, only to receive a bittersweet smile from him. "No. This war will only bring out the worst in us all." Haku was truly saddened on hearing him say that as his words sent a cold shiver across her heart. She narrowed her eyes when a squad of ninjas reached the corridor entrance, but Mangetsu was already upon them. The 7 Cloud Ninjas unleashed their blades all across Mangetsu's body to slice him to pieces and were left speechless when he dissolved into a puddle of water. Before they could blink, the Mizukage sun appeared behind them and severed their heads mercilessly. As the bodies hit the floor with sickening crunches, Mangetsu turned backwards to see his entire squad staring at him with varying emotions in their eyes. But the one feeling that was common among all those looks made this entire ordeal somewhat easier to bear. Respect. Let's go, we have a job to do. The White Castle, basement. Kusha cursed her luck as she was forced to sprint across a narrow and barely lit secret tunnel under the White Castle. Around her were the members of the elite squad that were tasked with protecting the supreme ruler of these lands. Captain, the daimyo will not show us any mercy if we leave his wife and children behind, argued Kushina, only to receive a grim glare in return from the leader of this squad. Whole squads have gone dark inside the castle, Karen. There is a different unit tasked with protecting our feudal lord's family. Our sole responsibility is ensuring that he stays alive no matter the cost. The castle is breached, and our safest bet is to take him to our nearest stronghold and make our next plan from there. Staying here only increases the risk of him being assassinated, considering we have no idea about the enemy's strength, exact location, tactics, or weapons, explained the captain seriously. Karen, as was Kushina's code name, nodded reluctantly. What the man had said was absolutely true, and their squad was only doing its job, but that did not bode well for her plan to get the daimyo killed. Her own escape plan was blasted to dust, and now she had no option but to follow orders, else she could risk exposing her own cover and getting killed herself. Where the hell are you, Minato? She glanced at the unconscious feudal lord currently being carried by one of the highly skilled Umbu and could not help but wonder how easy it would be to take his life in an instant. Maybe if she timed it right, she could assassinate her squad and make her escape. Her hand inched towards the sword at her back, only for her to freeze when their squad captain raised a fist, making everyone halt instantly. She narrowed her gaze to see the reason behind this obstruction and found a faint shadow visible in the far-off end of the barely lit tunnel. A hidden smile emerged on her lips as she saw he had red eyes. When he started charging towards the daimyo's detail, Kushina unleashed her sword as her comrades followed suit. Their captain gave a final warning which was ignored by the intruder, making the Umbu squad prepare for a battle. Kushina readied herself to strike the nearest Umbu from behind as her ally continued charging towards the daimyo's detail. Just when he was a few hundred meters away, she raised her weapon to strike her Umbu comrades, only to clearly see that those red eyes were not the ones she had remembered her entire life. Chapter 19, The Black Flash. Kirigakure. Tobirama quietly sat at the dining table of his prison home. If he focused a bit, he could feel the presence of 24 Umbu and hunter ninjas scattered in all directions outside the residence, watching his each move and ready to restrain him should he make any unexpected action. Still, it didn't worry him, but the information relayed to him by the man standing before him certainly did. Are you sure about this? He asked sternly. Yes, Lord Second. It seems Lord Hiruzen has agreed to quite a few demands related to trade between our nations apart from a ransom for your release. Kirigakure has won the diplomatic battle, reported Tsukumo Hatake with a heavy frown. I can't believe the Jounin Council, the elders and even the clan heads would be so weak-willed. All for the sake of one man. Cursed Tobirama furiously, wondering for the first time whether his decision to choose Hiruzen had been the right one or not. You are the head of the Senju clan, brother to the great Hashirama, a war veteran and capable military commander who can lead our nation back from the jaws of defeat it is currently facing against our enemies. The sentiment back home is quite weak, Tobirama-sama. Our losses are horrific. At this rate we will run out of ninjas before our enemy loses theirs. The people are desperate, and so is the Fire Lord, explained Tsukumo patiently. Then they all have lost rationality. Saving one man at the cost of the future might win them this war, but ultimately they would lose nonetheless. Only the enemy they shall lose to will be Kirigakure, said Tobirama bitterly. It is exactly why we need you back in Konoha, no matter the cost. Tobirama sighed but gave a reluctant nod in agreement with Tsukumo's feelings. A part of him was disappointed in his prized student and people, but another could understand what they were going through without him there to lead them. Their options were very limited to begin with. When will the transfer happen? Asked Tobirama in a resigned voice. Once the 7 ninja swordsmen are back. They will escort you back to Konoha and oversee the inking of the treaty between our nations, answered Tsukumo hesitantly. Tobirama blinked in surprise but didn't take long to understand the real reason behind such an unusual move. Usually, clan heads or professional diplomats oversaw the inking of such treaties, not the nation's most lethal soldiers. That crafty Mizukage praised Tobirama reluctantly. My lord? Asked Tsukumo in confusion. He'll send his own son who will represent not just the Hozuki clan but entire Land of Water as an important delegate. I suppose Genjutsu wants to groom both Mangetsu and Naruto to replace him in the future. Both are fine warriors, but this event shall give them a diplomatic experience as well, which is necessary for any future Kage. The presence of the 7 ninja swordsmen is a stark display of Kiri's power, and that it should be feared. All of this, I underestimated that man, admitted Tobirama with a reluctant but respectful nod towards the Mizukage tower in the center of the village. My lord, there is another thing that I wanted to bring to your attention, said Tsukumo hesitantly. Tobirama didn't miss how nervous Tsukumo looked, and his chakra was unbalanced, which could only mean the news he wanted to share would be unpleasant. Speak, Ino Yamanaka is pregnant. Tobirama grit his teeth in order to restrain his feelings on hearing the news. Instantly, memories of his last conversation with Naruto came flooding back to him just before the boy embarked on his current mission in the Land of Lightning. Should I perish, you will take Ino Yamanaka out of Kirigakure. By now, Tobirama had little uncertainty left in his heart about Naruto being his child. The DNA report, their similar chakra, his powers, his resolve and his familiar looks, the boy was his son. I'd barely entered my 40s and this boy plans to make me a grandfather. Tsukumo was quite shocked on hearing those words from his leader, much less seeing the ever-stern man smile, if only briefly. If things get too dangerous in her current assignment, or should Naruto perish in his current mission, pull her out of Kirigakure, ordered Tobirama. Again, Tsukumo was left stunned with the order he just received. Tobirama had seen that confusion in his eyes as he got up from his seat. You have a son, don't you? Asked Tobirama, earning a faint smile from the other veteran beside him. Yes. He's quite young, whispered Tsukumo, his ever-dutiful voice unable to hide the longing inside of the man. You have not seen him in person, never held him in your arms nor watched him smile, or call your name, said Tobirama solemnly, making a wistful smile arrive on Tsukumo's face. No, never. A ninja's life is all I've had the honor to know. Tobirama gave a nod of understanding as he sadly stared at the night sky. I wanted to be there for my son, but now... For the first time, Tsukumo watched regret arrive in Tobirama's eyes as the man clenched his fist shut. As a father himself, Tsukumo could truly understand what the Senju leader felt in this moment. Has there been any news of Naruto and his men? Asked the second Hokage. None so far. The Mizukage has not yet sent out any rescue teams, but he is nervous, reported Tsukumo, earning a nod from the white-haired man beside him. I couldn't do anything for Naruto. The fact that I don't even know his true name is a proof of my failure as a father. Many would say I am not responsible for his suffering and pain since I never knew he existed, but now I do, and I won't back away from him. We may have our differences, but he's family, a Senju, and we look out for our own, promised Tobirama fiercely. My lord, Ino is a part of the special unit investigating possible traitors in Kiri from different villages. Her presence has so far saved the lives of our operatives. Ino desires to stay and keep on protecting our men despite the danger to her life, said Tsukumo with a proud nod. She has a strong spirit. No wonder she got through to a man like Naruto, praised Tobirama with a smile. I have a feeling Naruto cares about her deeply. Did he ask you to do this? Questioned Tsukumo with a hint of curiosity, making Tobirama chuckle as he remembered the boy's exact words to him. More like threatened me. Tsukumo was left speechless. Tobirama, on the other hand, knew how important Ino was to Naruto. After the tragic life the boy had lived, she was perhaps his last ray of hope to having the closest thing to a normal life. Only time would tell whether that wish would someday become a reality. It was close to midnight with darkness ruling over the mist village. 4 shadows silently leapt across the rooftops rapidly, moving more and more away from the village center and directly towards one of the eastern sector districts. 3 of the group were wearing standard umbu masks, while the last and only female member of the group was wearing the traditional mask of the Hunter Ninja Corps. Ino calmly observed the ever-silent co-investigators running alongside her. To say they were a strange bunch would be an understatement. The most experienced of their little squad was a middle-aged man with stark white hair. He went by the name Kijima and had a sadistic streak while dealing with his enemies. She could still hear the screams of his victims once they were captured on charges of treason. It was fair to say his methods were barbaric, and each victim cracked in the end. The other was a young boy barely out of his teens, but despite his young age, he was faster than lightning with his sword. He was one of the best trackers among the entire Umbu branch and had one of the highest successful ratio of assassination missions in the Black Ops division. While no one knew his name, fellow operatives always referred to him as Kage after his hyper-fast sword-fighting style. The last member was actually a rather nice man named Hoshi. He was one of the rare few in their investigative branch who preferred a less barbaric approach towards their victims. It was strange considering he was a member of the Kage clan who were known to never show any mercy towards their enemies. He had a dangerous power that allowed him to create and weaponize bones of his own body, which made Ino quite wary of him. "So what's our mission tonight? Your summons didn't have any information," asked Ino, looking directly at Kojima, their squad leader. The older man glanced back at her, and she didn't fail to miss the distrust and spite in his gaze. It was another trait many Kiri shinobi shared of not trusting their own comrades, considering how brutal their academic system trained them to be. Naturally, the mission of their unit only made their squad members and their entire branch as a whole mistrustful of any person. But Kojima took paranoia to a new level and never revealed anything to his subordinates until absolutely necessary, especially with her. Ino was vexed when the man didn't answer her question and instead led their squad in silence for another few minutes until they reached an isolated part of the village. Her heart skipped a beat when she realized just where they had arrived. "This place," said Hoshi in shock and some hesitation present in his own voice. Kage remained silent as ever, but his narrowed gaze and tense posture showed he was fully alert of his surroundings. "Our next target resides here," revealed Kojima in a whisper. "I can't believe it. One of us, it can't be," denied Hoshi, for what he was looking at was a highly secretive and well-protected area where many of the village's Umbu Black Ops resided along with their families. "It doesn't matter what you believe. We have our orders. The Umbu commander is certain this little shit is a traitor. She claimed to have escaped from one of the nearby tiny islands when a plague broke out there a few years ago. Considering that it was a time of war and there were so many damn orphans moving around across the entire nation, nobody paid too much attention to another little shit entering Kinkaku as a street urchin. But unlike other rats her age in this village, she had talent and soon was able to enter the academy, going forward to become an Umbu over the years. But recently one of our other teams went to check out her background story. She claimed that her father, mother and 2 little brothers perished in the plague and she was the sole survivor. To be thorough, our teams went through the tiny island's death records over the years and found an interesting little fact," said Kojima with a vicious grin. Ino had a sinking feeling in her gut the more she heard, as it matched word by word with the backstory they had created for one of Konoha's youngest operatives working inside the Blood Mist village. You see, while the islanders confirmed that the girl lived there, the last they saw her was when she ran out into the sea in grief over her family's death and never returned. Most believed her dead until she showed up in Kinkaku, but I have a feeling there is something fishy here. How could a child barely the age of 10 with no knowledge or training of chakra be able to survive at sea for half a day before being rescued by a merchant ship, said Kojima seriously, as he passed on a small notebook to each member of his group. Ino froze when she saw a familiar face at the first page of the notebook. A picture of their target. Mikoto Uchiha. The evidence is circumstantial at best, argued Hoshi. Kage gently shook his head, making Hoshi refrain himself from protesting any more, much to Kojima's satisfaction. Learn from him. The Umbu commander wants to bring her in for questioning, says this girl might just lead us to more traitors, said Kojima fiercely, as he clenched his fists. What if he's wrong? It could sow further distrust among the Umbu, even spark resentment towards the village and the commander. They are a close-knit group and look out for their own, warned Ino, trying to find a solution to this desperate situation. The commander is prepared for that possibility, so is the Mizukage. Now, we have our orders. Kojima's words left little to be said after, and Ino bit her lip when she saw Kage calmly fall in line, while Hoshi looked conflicted but made no further protests. Reluctantly, she gave her nod of acceptance. As the squad entered the district, she saw a small puddle of water in a corner of the street. When she passed by it, a barely visible hand seal made a shadow emerge from that puddle. One bearing her face, who looked at her with a knowing gaze and disappeared into the nearby alley in an instant. She could only hope her water clone could report what she had discovered to Tsukumo as soon as possible. If Mikoto was captured and interrogated, Kiri could possibly discover how Ino herself had deceived them all by faking the lie detection tests. It could soon enough lead them to Tsukumo and every other Konoha operative based in the Land of Water. Maybe even Naruto. The thought of watching the man she loved be tortured and brutalized like the other spies she had helped catch from other villages made her nauseous. Capturing the target is the mission. Try not to rough her up too much, ordered Kijima. She's an umbu, she'll put up a fight, warned Hoshi. That's what we've got Mrs. Namikaze here for. Try and knock some sense into the brat to come with us peacefully. We three will surround the apartment just in case she tries to escape. Think you can handle it? Asked Kijima. Of course, replied Ino without hesitation, earning a gruff acknowledgement from the older man. As they got closer and closer towards their target's location, one question continued to haunt Ino's heart. Protect Konoha, or a comrade, or the one I love? Land of lightning, fire style, hellfire. May yelped in shock when the ground beneath her feet shook violently. As she fell flat on her ass, she watched nearly every enemy ninja or soldier around her meet the same fate. Whole swaths of the nearby forest were uprooted, trees were turned to ash, and it felt as if the whole mountain was coming apart. She felt a bone-crushing weight falling upon her very being that made even breathing nearly impossible. Looking at Kisame, she was surprised to see a man with as much chakra as him appear to be in the same condition as her. The less said about the Kumogakyu forces, the better. Judging from the still forms of some of the younger and much older fighters, they had probably died out of shock as their hearts couldn't take this foul energy. She watched as dozens upon dozens of scorching beams of fire emerged from the very earth. It was as if they were summoned from the depths of hell to wash away the sins of the mortal world in their searing flames. Volcanic eruptions happened in dozens of places as the huge swath of flames continued to rise upward and upward until they completely disappeared among the clouds in the sky, painting them red. What is this energy? Asked Kisame with a painful grunt. Run, girl. Before it's too late. Mei had only a second to grasp the words whispered by her Biju, as she watched in terror as Kinkaku in his tainted chakra armor started growing in size exponentially. His previously clasped hands that had unleashed this entire inferno of flames started turning into giant claws, and soon he started appearing less and less human. In a matter of 30 seconds, Mei and every human in the area blanched when they came face to face with a being they had only heard stories about. Tales that terrified them, a presence they wished to avoid even in their worst nightmares. The nine-tailed fox. That crazy bastard, he is not allowed to transform like that, ever whispered one of the Kumogakyu leaders. Why would he go so far, and his entire force has unleashed their full power as well? Look! Kisame heard the chatter among the enemy leadership and could not help but feel he was missing something here. The Kinkaku were feared to be the most dangerous Black Ops unit in the world. For them to unleash their full power and strike with their entire force right from the start was absurd. Unless... He looked at Naruto, who had stopped his charge and was instead coldly watching the army before him, not to mention the damned fox. Kisame could sense no fear inside of that man, but instead there existed a sense of euphoria in his chakra. It glowed so brightly that it was almost painful. Run! Mei could not fault nearly dozens of Kumogakyu ninja who instantly bolted from the battlefield, taking nearly half of their entire force with them in their fear. Few commanders tried to stop them but were instantly overpowered by the fearful ninjas. Only a small population remained, but none seemed interested in fighting anymore. Instead, they all were watching the sight before their eyes. For it was not often that man ever got to witness a battle among titans. Mei saw the volcanic flames that had emerged from the earth were still burning brightly with no signs of stopping. Anything within a 500-meter radius was evaporated from its sheer heat, and they were aligned in such a way that it prevented any of the other ninja from either side from stepping inside the battle that was about to begin. Not that anyone wanted to. She felt Naruto gathering a vast amount of energy within himself, and knew he was more powerful than most shinobi she had ever known. Perhaps one of the strongest in the whole world. But against these monsters, he was just one man. She remembered his look of disappointment at the start of this mission, and could never forget how much it had hurt her to see him look at her like a nuisance. And now, she finally had a chance to make things right. Then why the hell was she hesitating? It's because you'll die, child, whispered the giant slug, but not unkindly. Mei looked at the monstrous Biju within her. It was impossible to understand how the beast felt because of its lack of expressions, but she had never felt any malicious hate towards her personally from him. Granted, he always tried to take control of her body whenever he got a chance and was never one to speak too much. However, there were times when he had granted her his power to save both their lives in many dangerous situations she had faced in her life. So be it, Then she answered him without flinching for a moment. The mild amusement she had felt from him earlier disappeared and was instead replaced by curiosity, as he peered down at her tiny form from the cage he was stuck in. "You like this man, don't you?" asked the Six Tails curiously. "Naruto is gazing at a future I can't even see. He is a symbol of hope and pride for my village, my people. Most of all, he is a dear friend who tried to be there for me without expecting anything in return and never looked down upon me because I was a Jinchuriki. He is not perfect and has many flaws, but he is the commander I chose to follow into this hell. It's only right I follow him till the very end," replied Mei with a fierce conviction. The Six Tails didn't miss the fear in the girl's heart, and couldn't fault her for being afraid of the nine-tailed fox's chakra. But there were also very strong feelings inside her heart for that man. She respected him more than anything else and didn't want to let him down even if it meant facing death. "That's my answer." "What about you?" asked Mei with a challenge. "What about me?" retorted the Six Tails amusedly. "Do you like losing to the Nine Tails so much?" Mei knew she had hit a nerve when the calm atmosphere vanished in her mindscape and was replaced by a growing aura of anger and hatred. She watched the Six Tails smash himself against its cage and smiled when she felt the same feelings in his own heart. An cannibalistic desire to fight and devour. A true monster. "Let's have some fun, then." A wild whirlwind swept through the entire area, washing away a huge chunk of the eternal fire pillars, much to the surprise of everyone on the battlefield, save for one. The same man was smiling as another shadow stepped beside him. Mei felt unbelievable energy flow across her entire body. It was more stronger than she had ever felt in her life, and she clearly understood the reason behind it when she saw the four tails emerging from her back. 4 tails of Biju chakra. Nearly double the amount of energy she had ever mustered through her own will from the wild beast inside her. She heard it snort, making it clear that it was thanks to his consent that she could harness this much power in the first place. She looked at the person she had walked into this hell for. "Why?" he asked curiously. Mei looked at her clenched fists, and only one answer came to mind. "It's what needs to be done," she answered resolutely with a smile. "You're a fine shinobi, Mei." She bowed her head gently in acceptance of his praise before sternly glancing at the enemies in front of them, preparing herself for a fight. Naruto calmly glanced at Kisame, who was staring at the duo with a surprised gaze. "Think you can handle them?" he challenged with a smirk, gesturing towards the rest of the remaining enemy ninjas, who glared hatefully as some of their own resolve came back. The wimps had already fled the battlefield, and the weaklings had paid their tribute in blood. Only the strong, only the ruthless, only the determined, only the ninja remained. Kisame gave a bestial roar as he clasped his hands together, making his chest swell monstrously in an instant. Water style, water shockwave. Naruto closed his eyes, ignoring the panicked and anguished screaming of the shocked Kumogaku ninjas as Kisame began his attack without warning. He felt Mei getting closer to him, and could feel the bloodlust inside of her courtesy of the beast. "What's the plan, Commander? Solo or co-ops?" she asked seriously. He raised a single hand sign which made her smirk in return. "Very well." Dark lines emerged underneath his eyes and across his entire face, reaching way down below his neck and deeper into his chest. When he opened his gaze, Mei was surprised to see his reddish-green colored eyes with a slit pattern. His chakra is so still. It's so unfazed and constant, it's as if he's attained a sense of enlightenment that others here could not grasp. I can still feel him at my back, and yet he is right beside me. Is this the power of Sage Chakra? The ability to become one with nature and become the all-seeing? Thought Mei in wonder, remembering the few stories she had heard of brave monks and few genius shinobi who mastered this power across human history. She had never met one in person and had stopped believing in such legends until she met him. She could still remember the way in which this power had been used by him to save Mangetsu's life in this very mission itself. She could not stop the sense of curiosity that developed inside of her heart to see what more he could do with this power. 107, huh? Not bad fight, whispered Naruto, as he raised his burning swords even as dark chakra leaked from his body. Let's go with Formation D, she suggested, as the first wave of Kinkaku monsters charged at them. He nodded, making her instantly weave her hands to a complex set of seals at lightning speed. Hiruma! Mei unleashed nearly 4 dozen green-colored liquid bullets from her mouth, and launched them straight towards the incoming enemy monsters in Biju form. The Kinkaku troops growled and easily managed to dodge each of the incoming attacks through their own enhanced speed by using their tainted beast chakra inside their bodies. That was until the one at the front of this charge saw a small black chakra-like bullet flying secretly under the shadow of a handful of the green-colored acid-like bullets unleashed by the newly discovered Jinchuriki. Shadow Shuriken Jutsu being used to fuse two ninjutsu techniques in an instant? Shit, his thought became reality when the next second he saw a dark flash happen before his eyes. A burning and eternal pain flashed across his neck as he caught a glimpse of a pair of merciless dark reddish-green colored eyes. He felt himself hit the ground and tumble a few meters away, only to see his body now missing a neck fall limply to the ground and be engulfed by the small fire burning across his severed neck. His last sight of this hellish world was to witness multiple black flashes happen across the area, followed by his entire squad meeting the same fate one after another. Kisame stabbed his sword clean through the neck of another jounin and blinked in surprise when he peeked a glance at the other battlefield. A moment ago, he had seen 14 Kinkaku charge at his comrades, and now there were 14 headless burning corpses turning to ashes a flash later. What the hell had happened in those 5 seconds? It's him. How could this be? We need to flee. Demon, killer. Kisame narrowed his eyes on hearing the frightened murmuring among the Kumogakyo forces as they stared at Naruto's standing form as if he was the spirit of death itself. He remembered a similar fear and desire to flee from the Kumogakyo ninjas in Osaka City. In fact, they had fled on the orders of the Kinkaku, who sacrificed their lives to allow that escape. Coincidences never happened twice in the shinobi world. The ninjas standing against him didn't lack in guts until a few moments ago, when they chose to stay even when others didn't. They chose to fight despite facing the risk of becoming collateral damages in the Kinkaku's fight, only to now have the fear of Kami itself spread across their hearts on seeing 14 of their nations and one of the world's most strongest warriors fall in a flash. It still came as a surprise when Kisame watched all the remaining Kumogakyo ninjas before him literally vanish from the battlefield in a frenzy. He growled in frustration and chased after them, only to continue getting more and more surprised when the fleeing ninjas didn't even look back once or slow down their pace even when they were nearly at least a kilometer away from the battlefield. Water style, water bullets. He focused on the closest straggler, a young chunin who yelped in pain as the water bullets tore through various chakra points across his back, making him lose balance and fall from one of the giant trees towards the ground. Kisame cursed when his target violently crashed through several large branches before landing with a crunching thud which was a clear evidence of several broken ribs at least. He approached the limp young boy who was occasionally twitching in pain and raised his sword above him. "Why are your people so afraid of him?" asked Kisame without mercy. He narrowed his gaze when he saw his enemy rasping something incoherent, and cursed his luck on realizing the boy's throat was probably ruptured in the fall, judging by the nasty bruises all over his neck, and his struggle to breathe was enough to cement Kisame's assumption that every one of the boy's ribs were broken as well. He was truly unlucky. "Biju, killer." Kisame blinked in shock on hearing those words spoken barely above a whisper. He instantly knelt beside the young boy and placed his hand over his chest, only to share his chakra, easing the young shinobi's pain by a fraction. He looked barely in his teens, but in his heart, the boy knew his life was already over, judging from his resigned gaze. In return for the small mercy Kisame was showing, or for some other reason, the Kiri ninja saw the dying enemy shinobi struggle to speak. "Spartan. Village S. Rank Secret. The Black Flash." The boy collapsed after whispering those words, even as his lifeless eyes gazed at the hellish sky above him until Kisame closed those eyes respectfully. He looked back in the direction of the battlefield, and couldn't help the distrustful frown that came across his grim face. "There is something that you are hiding from us all, Naruto." Kushina was left speechless when her own Umbu comrades turned their blades against her, even as she watched the red-eyed masked man charge in their direction. She unleashed her own blade and effectively blocked the incoming swords with her own. "What the hell are you doing?" she yelled at her squad leader, only to see his lidded gaze. "Genjutsu." She cursed in silence, and wonder on seeing every member of the daimyo's personal guard unit were in the same condition. Her attempt to dispel them out of their trap proved unsuccessful, which made her arrive at only one conclusion: to place Umbu Black Ops in an unbreakable genjutsu in an instant from such a distance. "There's no mistaking it," she thought worriedly, even as she jumped away from her now hostile former squad as the masked man stepped beside them. "Oh, a smart and strong one you are. To think you resisted my visual prowess," praised the masked man in a very masculine and powerful voice. "Sharingan," whispered Kushina, even as she avoided looking into those eyes again by only focusing on the man's feet. She watched him calmly create a clone of himself who took the unconscious lightning daimyo before disappearing in a wave of flames. You're in my way. Kushina took a step back in fear as a killing intent more dangerous than the bijus washed over her. She was frozen in her tracks on watching a quick flash followed by the severed heads of her former Umbu comrades fly in the sky before crashing gracelessly alongside their bodies in the dirt. To think you have enough of a strong will to resist my genjutsu. The tales about you Spartans were true, after all, said the masked man in a surprised and arrogant tone. A soft wave of wind flowed across the narrow corridor. But then again, I was not even using a fraction of my power. Kushina's blood ran cold when she heard those words from behind her, and the next instant, her world turned red. Chapter 20 World of Victors. Naruto coldly stared at the charred corpses of the first Kinkaku soldiers that engaged against him in battle before pointing one of his flaming swords challengingly in the direction of the remaining 93 Kinkaku troops and their demonic fox-transformed leader. A small smile came upon his lips when he heard many of them roar in righteous fury over the fate of their unlucky comrades. What was that speed? He looked beside him as Mei arrived at his side with a completely disbelieving look present on her face even as she stared at the remains of the Kinkaku. One moment they were charging, a blink of a second later, they were charred corpses on the ground. Hirishin Level 1. It's my clan's most powerful technique, revealed Naruto calmly, while gazing at any movement that the enemy was about to make. Level 1? You mean there is more? Asked Mei in shock, earning an amused smile from the blonde Namikaze beside her. Level 3 is the highest speed, a power which makes you even faster than lightning itself. Although a jutsu that results in the user's death, said Naruto with a hint of sadness ever present in his voice. He would know, for he had seen his mother perform all levels of this jutsu, and meet her death in order to save his life and the future of Yuzu. He narrowed his eyes when the nine-tailed transformed Kinkaku roared in apocalyptic fury. Can you take the 30 Kinkaku on the left flank? He asked hesitantly. I'll try to stay alive, answered Mei with a nervous smile, but was relieved when he gave her a comforting smile. If you are in trouble, just use the kunai I gave you. I will be there, assured Naruto, pointing at the three-pronged kunai in her pouch which he had shared with each of his squad member, even Kushina. Thinking about his Spartan comrade made him worry, as he should have felt or heard something from her by now. Instead, there was only silence. He quickly made a hand seal, making ash-like chakra be released from his body until it soon took the form of a complete carbon copy of himself. The clone and the original locked eyes with each other. You know what to do, instructed Naruto with a knowing gaze. Got it, boss. Mei blinked in confusion on this sudden action, and before she could ask, the clone vanished in a flash and her attention was quickly diverted to the front as the entire Kinkaku force alongside the giant nine-tailed fox charged. She could not help the raw fear that gripped her heart on that sight. Mei, we will go home once this is over. All of us. The fear in her heart stopped as he took up position in front of her, even as his reassuring words made her feel hope once again. She nodded gratefully towards him before sprinting towards the 30 Kinkaku approaching from the left flank. Naruto nodded respectfully before fixing his gaze towards the approaching 63 Kinkaku from the center and right flank led by their leader in his Biju form. Now then, let's see how good you really are. His hands quickly moved through a complex set of hand seals as he summoned nearly 1/6 of his chakra reserves apart from using the nature energy around him as he saw a few charging Kinkaku creating something. Multi-tailed beast bomb barrage. Naruto took in a deep breath as massive amounts of ash-like chakra was released from his body even as the mini-bombs of mass destruction raced towards him. Ash release. Particle annihilation. The earth was torn apart. There was a massive rumbling as the blonde's chakra ignited as it neared the dozens of Bijudama, which also went off, rendering everyone blind by launching a beaming aura of light. Kushina's eyes widened when she caught a glimpse of the masked man appearing behind her, his dark red eyes zooming in on her back with a predatory gaze even as the sword in his hand moved to skewer her from behind. Until there was a sound barely above a whisper as another presence flashed in between, even as sparks flew as two blades crashed against each other. Two pair of dark red eyes connected, earning a small smirk from the masked man. He bellowed ferociously even as he launched a martial kick towards the newly arrived blonde shinobi, and watched him dodge it with only to realize the target of the attack had always been Kushina in the first place. It was the masked man's turn to be surprised when he saw Naruto teleport in front of Kushina and quickly place a hand over her shoulder just as the powerful kick was about to connect with her bare back. They both disappeared in a dark flash, completely unharmed. The masked man chuckled amusedly as he retracted his leg, which had met only thin air, instead of crushing Kushina's back. He's fast. Perhaps even faster than you, Tobirama. Kushina barely held back the contents of her stomach from spilling over as she appeared in mid-air over the top of a forest of giant trees. She felt firm hands quickly grab her waist before kicking them both swiftly in the southern direction. She looked at her savior, or rather his ash clone, judging from his chakra levels. Why did we run? She asked hesitantly. Granted, she had been struggling in that fight, but with him by her side they may have had a chance. Even if he was a clone and the original was fighting somewhere in the north, she could feel it. That man, he's stronger than me. Kushina was at a loss of words after hearing his confession, but it was the nervous look in his eyes that scared her. He has more chakra than me, than anyone could have ever imagined. You felt it, didn't you? He asked with a knowing gaze. He has the same level of chakra as Hashirama had, agreed Kushina reluctantly. They would know, for it was in saving Hashirama's life that the Spartans lost theirs. And while there were many powerful shinobi in the world, none could match up to the legendary power of the first Hokage. Only one. Kushina's eyes widened as she remembered those red eyes, that sinister chakra, the unbelievable killing intent as she connected all the dots. What scared her even more was the fact that she felt that same chakra moving in the direction of the original, who was fighting somewhere in the north. She looked at the clone in alarm, only to see a resigned look in his gaze. Before she could speak, they arrived at a cliff beneath which flowed a large waterfall. Kushina recognized the place as this stream connected with the ocean and was the doorway to a route leading to Yuzu far away. When he placed her on the ground, she realized his intentions clearly. I'm not leaving you here. Not again. She yelled furiously, earning a faint smile from him. Go home, Kushina. You have served the village more than enough, he praised sincerely with his trademark eye smile, which nearly broke her heart. Then come with me. We can both go home together, live the life we only ever dreamed about till this day, she begged him, even as she wrapped her hands gently around his cheeks. A life in the shadows. That is the path I chose, to walk in the darkness in order to protect the village my family died for. I intend to walk on that path till the very end, said Naruto resolutely. Kushina clenched her fists even as tears arrived in her eyes. You know it ends one way only, she warned in a whisper, earning a dark nod from him. I couldn't protect either my parents or my brother. I failed my men and my village. This is the only way I can atone for all those failures, so that someday I could look them in the eye when I meet them in death, he explained calmly. Tears fell from her eyes as he came forward and wrapped his arms around her in a warm but fierce hug. Protect the village, and the Uzumaki name. Kushina sobbed into his chest as she couldn't help but feel this was the last time she would see him. Feel his arms around her body, filling it with warmth. Watch that smile and those eyes of his. For a long time, I lived as the voice of vengeance for the Spartans, but after tonight there is no need for that. You are the true legacy of us Spartans, he said with a hint of happiness and true hope present in his voice. She looked up at him only to see him giving her a truly happy smile. Go and live on our behalf, Kushina. Keep the village safe and ensure our people remember the legacy of those that chose a life in the shadows to ensure they lived their life in the light. You're my only friend I can entrust this dream of mine to, requested Naruto politely. I will carry on your will, Captain, she promised him tearfully, earning a smile from him. Maybe in some other life, we could have. Kushina's eyes widened on hearing those words, and looking into his eyes made her heart skip a beat as she saw the same feelings present in them as the one which she carried in her heart for him. Words couldn't describe how happy and heartbroken she felt in the same moment. To have him acknowledge and return her feelings only to know deep down that her dream could never become a reality. She looked into those red eyes once more to see all those dreams coming true. She lived a reality where none of them became Spartans and instead lived normal lives. They studied at the academy together and became friends. There was no war, and his family was still alive. She watched herself be placed on the same team as him as they climbed the ranks together until few years later he confessed his feelings for her. They were married in time and went forward to have 2 beautiful children. A handsome boy named Arima who looked just like him, and a daughter named Kasumi who took after her. Both children were doted on by their grandparents and spoiled rotten by their uncle Nagato, much to Minato's chagrin. The final memory she lived was standing alongside the entire Namake's family, and smiling for an invisible camera, a moment and a life where all she had known was happiness, love and peace. The trance broke and she found herself standing once again on that cliff. Only now the hole in her heart was filled. Her pain was washed away as he came forward and kissed her gently across her lips with the same love and passion he had shown her in that dream. How she wished it had been a reality instead. She steeled herself when he broke the kiss and took a few steps back. They both looked into each other's eyes and knew what had to be done, no matter how painful. "Thank you for everything, Minato. You truly are a kind man," she whispered sincerely, for no one else in this world had cared for her as much as he had. "That's what friends are for," he replied with a mischievous wink. "All these years I made the wrong choice. It was not the Spartans, the village, justice or revenge that my heart desired. My entire life I only wanted to be beside someone who accepted me and cared for me, only to never realize that person had always been by my side. I was a fool," said Kushina with a miserable laugh. "The past is full of regrets. It is the future we must look to. Create a village in a world where there is no need for future Spartans," advised Naruto with hope present in his heart. "I will. But I also want you to know." She came forward and raised herself so she could look directly into his eyes, even as she placed her hand around his neck and bumped her forehead gently against his own. "Even if the entire world turns against you one day, I will still be your ally." His eyes widened on hearing her words, and the resolve he saw in her gaze truly humbled him as he kissed her once more and tried to stop the thoughts of how life with her could have been for him. She was his first love after all. They broke apart a few moments later as Kushina clenched her fist before thumping it firmly against her chest. "For you, we give our heart." The meaning behind the Spartan salute was never more clear to him than in this moment, as he returned the salute, making her smile before she jumped down the cliff and disappeared into the raging water. He walked towards the cliff, and as he started to disappear he allowed the hard-fought tears to fall from his eyes. "We will never meet again, my friend." A lone tear fell from Naruto's eyes as he experienced the memories of his clone which disappeared after carrying out his mission. He fought back the lump in his throat and the heartbreak burning in his chest by focusing on the ruined landscapes and the enemies that surrounded him. He could also feel the enemy his clone and Kushina had faced approaching in his direction rapidly. At the most, he had 15 minutes before that man arrived on this battlefield. He saw Mei desperately engaged in a fight for her life against the Kinkakus on her flank. She had killed a few but was struggling against the strength of the remaining troops and their combined force. Judging from her rasped breathing and fluctuating chakra levels, her Biju powers would recede soon, leaving her to fight with her own power, which would not be enough. He looked around searching for Kisame but frowned when he didn't see the man anywhere near the battle. He extended his chakra senses and found him approaching this area again from the forest, and while he was curious as to what made the man go there in the first place, Naruto hoped Kisame could assist Mei in her fight as soon as possible. He didn't get any more time to think as one of the nearby Kinkakus charged. Unfortunately for that monster, he had been tracked even before he moved an inch, courtesy of Naruto's sage mode and his red eyes. The former Spartan commander launched his left-handed sword, which sailed forward in a flash and skewered through the charging Kinkaku's head in an instant before burying itself straight into the heart of his other comrade that was standing behind. As the corpses of the two Kinkaku collapsed to the ground, Naruto was forced to dodge as two massive tails smashed the ground he was previously standing upon, courtesy of the giant nine-tailed fox Kinkaku, which was clearly enraged by the continuous slaughter of his troops. Even in midair, Naruto's eyes widened when four Kinkaku appeared all around him and launched punches from all sides. Only to experience pummeling one of their own comrades in all their might as Naruto switched himself with a nearby Kinkaku who was unfortunately smashed to death in that attack even as the blonde escaped. He didn't get to relax as the remaining enemies charged at him from all sides, making him grip his lone sword in his hand. He slashed his blade horizontally, splitting the first Kinkaku to charge him in half before jumping in the air and performing a quick set of hand seals. Fire style, fireball jutsu. Few of the Kinkaku screamed in agony when raging fireballs rained down upon them instantly, and while they were injured, it wasn't enough to kill them. As they tried to get back on their feet, they barely saw dark ash-like chakra pass by them, followed by the demonic-eyed blonde menace appearing right beside them. Sword raised to deliver the end. Even as more heads rolled, Naruto could feel the energy from his sage mode dwindling rapidly because of the high chakra-consuming techniques and hyper-speed movements of his. He doubted without these two trump cards any normal shinobi who have been able to even stand up against these demonic warriors. He dodged another one of the mighty tails from the demonic fox only to come straight in front of its giant mouth. It roared, unleashing winds so powerful that it swept Naruto nearly 100 feet away, where he crashed against scores of trees gracelessly. He could hear Mei calling out to him from a distance as he coughed blood and felt at least one of his ribs had been broken and his back badly bruised. His attire across his chest was ripped to shreds with sharp cuts having embedded all over his chest in a wild manner. The only relief he had was the fact that the bleeding was almost stopped, and soon enough the wounds would vanish thanks to his Spartan genetic enhancements that boosted healing prowess. If that wasn't enough, he had Hashirama's chakra in his body which accelerated the process. As he tore off the few remaining torn fabrics of his shirt, he saw nearly 35 Kinkaku were left out of the initial force of 63 that had attacked him. What concerned him was the fox-transformed Kinkaku leader that was the true danger to his life and that of his comrades. It had to be taken down. He got up on his feet and gripped his sword, watching as the Kinkaku gathered forward as a mighty shield between him and their demonic leader. He charged forward without hesitation at full speed as all his enemies came together. Wind-style, devastating wave of destruction. He had already launched one of his three-pronged kunai in the air as the enemy unleashed a powerful storm of winds straight towards him to slice him to pieces before he even got close. He teleported to his previously launched kunai in the air but couldn't save the lower end of his legs from avoiding the attack and fought back a scream as his thighs and Achilles' heel were sliced open. That sacrifice, however, got him exactly where he wanted to reach. The nine-tailed transformed Kinkaku glared at his form flying towards him in the air as Naruto clasped both of his hands together. Ash release, rain of death. Hundreds of ash-like bullets were unleashed from Naruto's body, which rained all over the beast's body but couldn't cause any harm, making the monster growl as it unleashed another powerful gust of wind that blew Naruto away. However, it glared when he saw Naruto smirk. Its eyes widened when it saw for the first time small marks occurring all over its body in the exact spots where Naruto's ash bullets had harmlessly crashed against. "You're mine now!" The first to be sliced apart were his hind legs as Naruto flashed behind him with a victorious grin. Before Kinkaku could launch a counterattack, the blonde had already flashed away to its next target, which was tearing open the beast's back. He had pumped in as much chakra as he could into his lone burning sword to make it cut deeper and burn flesh more fiercely, much to Kinkaku's agony. After destroying the hind legs and the beast's back, the blonde flashed towards its front, making the monster angrily rush all of its tails forward in a desperate measure to kill the mortal enemy that was butchering him. To Kinkaku's dismay, Naruto teleported himself on top of one of the crashing tails and coldly smiled as the attack intended for his demise instead fell upon the Kinkaku troops nearby in a deadly friendly fire incident. He launched those ash bullets of his to mark my entire body with his chakra markers and is now using it to avoid all my attacks by teleporting to different parts. He mocks me, thought Kinkaku furiously. His rage turned into agony the next moment when Naruto again appeared in front of him. Only this time he ran his blade clean through the fox's eyes, setting them on fire. The beast's roar of pain shook the entire land. Mei plunged her sword deep into a Kinkaku's neck and dodged another slash to her back, only to realize her enemies had stopped attacking her and were looking in another direction. She heard a painful bestial scream that shook the entire land and mountains. Her eyes widened when she saw the nine-tailed fox transformation being torn to shreds within seconds, courtesy of faint black flashes happening all across its body. In its desperation, it was unknowingly stomping over its own nearby comrades, making them meet the death god and the rare survivors to flee for their own safety. Inside of the Tobirama air, the six tails also watched the spectacle. This is the same chakra I had felt all those years ago before the two tails was murdered. Is he humanity's fastest soldier? Our size and power are of no use if we cannot even see him. I can understand now as to why one of my brethren lost to him, thought the six tails cautiously. It, however, didn't disclose his assumptions to its host, finding it more interesting for her to arrive at her own conclusion rather than be influenced by his own. It laughed when he saw some brave Kinkaku ignore Mei and charge in the direction of their leader who was being torn apart. Few were not that brave and instead fled on seeing what was happening, while a handful just remained rooted in their spot in terror and awe, including Mei and the newly arrived Kisame, who watched the sight before their eyes. Naruto panted harshly and grunted in pain as he tried to get back on his feet, only to feel the pain in his severed Achilles heel holding him back. While his wounds all across his body were healing, the pace was much slower considering he had exhausted large amounts of chakra to butcher the giant fox and the Kinkaku with him. His only solace was the fact that most of the Kinkaku were either dead, brutally injured, or had fled. He saw a few furious ones charging towards him from Mei's flank and raised his sword to defend himself. My sage mode is finished, and so is half of my chakra. Hydration really takes a toll on my body if I use it too much continuously. Nevertheless, I have to do what needs to be done no matter the cost. For the Spartans and for Kusha, thought Naruto with determination. Even so, he still needed time before he could face nearly 10 more of those Kinkaku monsters. He looked at the butchered 9-tailed Kinkaku, which was pitifully lying on the ground, moaning in pain and anger. It had been carved up all across its body, and it would be a while before it even recovered. The fact that its eyes were also destroyed made him utterly useless in the fight for the time being. Satisfied, Naruto turned his attention back towards the approaching enemies just in time to watch them be torn apart as more warriors jumped in the way to defend him. As the Kinkaku fell, he saw Mangetsu turning towards him and gave him a firm nod. "We've got your back, Captain," the boy meant it as the rest of the 7 ninja swordsmen charged into the battlefield, and while 2 were with Mangetsu, the rest had gone forward to help Mei, led by Kisame himself, as they made quick work of the remaining Kinkaku. Soon enough, Haku arrived by his side and accelerated the healing of his wounds with her own medical ninjutsu, earning a thankful nod from him. "Report," commanded Naruto, once he was back on his feet with his wounds having been temporarily healed. The look of satisfaction mixed with disappointment in Mangetsu's eyes didn't bode well. "We executed the daimyo's top advisors and most of his top generals. We also neutralized his wife and children, but unfortunately we couldn't find him in time before more reinforcements arrived, forcing us to retreat. I take full responsibility for this failure," Commander explained Mangetsu without hesitation or fear. Naruto gravely nodded, being already aware of the fact that the odds were never in their favor to begin with. "You did well, Mangetsu. To execute a mission to the best of one's abilities and circumstances while bringing their troops back home safe are the primary responsibilities of a squad leader. Any officer that does not understand this does not deserve the rank. You have nothing to be ashamed of," said Naruto honestly, as he placed a comforting hand on the younger boy's shoulder and felt the tension in his body vanish as he gave a relieved nod. "What next, Commander?" asked Jinpachi seriously, as he and the others arrived near the blonde. They all got their answer when they heard a mighty roar and looked in the direction of the giant fox-like Kinkaku left alone on the battlefield amidst the destroyed corpses of his men. The rage burning inside of that beast was felt by every one of the swordsmen, and Mei as well. "Six Tails says retreat now," warned Mei in alarm. The surprised squad looked at each other in uncertainty and surprise. Before they could question Mei on the meaning behind her words, much less why the Biju inside of her was helping them, they saw the giant fox raising its head towards the sky. Even if it was blind, it started to formulate a large sphere of energy above itself. The sphere was so dark that not even light could escape from it, and it was only growing bigger and bigger until it was larger than the beast itself. And it was still growing. "Kinkaku. That mad bastard. He will flatten the entire land for nearly 100 kilometers with this much power. We're fucked." The rattled squad was surprised when Naruto slowly walked in front of them and towards the dangerous beast. "Commander," Mangetsu was silenced when he came face to face with those red eyes devoid of any mercy and full of determination more powerful than any man could ever possess. "Hold your ground, Mangetsu. Didn't I teach you that your true mettle is tested when the tide turns against you and your actions thereafter determine how you are remembered?" asked Naruto coldly, some anger seeping into his voice. The rest of the squad looked at Mangetsu and awaited the decision he would make. After Naruto, he was the second in command of this mission and troops. Considering the commander still wanted to fight despite knowing they were doomed, whatever choice Mangetsu made would very likely determine the course of action the group of Kiri warriors would take. Mangetsu looked at his comrades and then at Naruto. The commander's wounds may have been sealed, but his body is still recovering. His chakra is nearly at half capacity. Can he truly fight against that monster? Then again, even if we do run, how far can we go before we are caught in the radius of the explosion, which will be beyond our comprehension? Should I believe in the commander or the abilities of myself and my comrades? Thought Mangetsu frustratedly. "We are out of time. Make a choice you will not regret," commanded Naruto fiercely. Mangetsu's hands were shaking, but after considering all the possibilities and their history, he stepped forward and looked at the surprised members of their squad. "We make our stand right here," ordered Mangetsu fiercely. "We can't beat that." "We'll die," protested Amiri angrily, as she pointed at the large sphere of dark energy being made ever greater in size by the mad beast. "Then run, but don't ever consider yourself as one of the 7. Or have you forgotten who we are?" demanded Mangetsu in an ironclad voice. Naruto saw a few of the squad members clenching their fists shut on hearing those words. The look in their eyes has changed. They were still scared out of their wits and hated being put into this position, but none of them took a step back and instead looked at their commander as Mangetsu stepped beside him. Looking at the Hozuki heir and his resolve made Naruto find a new respect in his heart for the boy. You'll make a great Kage someday, Mangetsu. In some ways, you remind me of the brother I lost. Ready to fight and die, Commander? Pledged Mangetsu bravely. He watched as Naruto created 4 clones of himself by releasing more ash-like chakra from his body. Mangetsu was alarmed when he felt the commander's chakra reserves drop drastically after that move but chose to believe that Naruto knew what he was doing. I'll take care of the beast. You and the others share every ounce of your chakra with my clones, instructed Naruto seriously. Everything? Asked Mangetsu calmly. Yes, if you want to live, that is. Mangetsu gulped but gave a firm nod of acknowledgement as the rest of the squad arrived by their side. Quickly, Naruto's clones took up defensive formations around the group in all 4 directions and sank to one knee while clasping their hands together. For Violet Flames formation. A 20 feet long barrier in all directions was created by Naruto's clones that encased the entire squad in its protection. Each and every member of the 7 ninja swordsmen alongside Mei herself started sharing all the chakra they had left to the clones, making the barrier glow a bright purple-violet. A faint smile could not be stopped from arriving on Naruto's lips as he watched the once self-centered warriors come together as a squad. It may have been hardship and their own survival that brought them to this point, but it was a step forward. These were the men and women he would be proud to fight and die alongside with. I failed my men once, not again. He flipped a lone 3-pronged kunai in the air as Kinkaku's monstrous eyes were healed and it glared victoriously at him. Baijidama. Mei nearly pissed herself in fear as the giant bomb of death charged in their direction, destroying each and every inch of land in its way. The entire earth shook violently as she saw a lone object whistle towards the approaching form of dark energy. Her eyes seared in pain as a blinding light erupted from the frontal part of the Baijidama. Just before she closed her eyes to save her vision, she saw a barely visible flash appear in front of the light by catching something. A second later, the bright light disappeared. She opened her eyes gingerly only to see a smoking landscape outside their barrier. What the cursed Zabuza, only to be stopped mid-sentence. The blinding light appeared once more, only this time it was up in the sky, and right above Kinkaku's form. Kinkaku's eyes widened in horror as it saw a black flash appear above his wounded form. His gaze connected with the cold red eyes even as its wielder held a large arm made up of black chakra that had grasped the ignited Baijidama. Hiraishin Level 2. The world went white as the Baijidama was slammed right on top of Kinkaku form without mercy. A bone-chilling scream was unleashed by the monster as it watched the black chakra-like arm compressing the entire volatile energy into a single point of contact. Him. A tortured scream escaped the monster's lips as the heat of the attack burned through his entire skin in a flash, followed by that fire spreading across its entire body, melting flesh and bone in an instant. It felt each and every fiber of itself be vaporized away right down to its last cell. The black chakra-like arm holding the exploding energy cut through the beast like a knife slicing through butter and smashed itself into the ground, unleashing a massive shockwave followed by an earthquake of unprecedented nature. Kisame and his squad started losing their balance as the ground beneath their feet began cracking apart. Hold! The fearsome war cry unleashed by Mangetsu reinforced the resolve of the Kiri warriors as each of them latched themselves to their nearest clone fiercely, pouring all of their chakra into the barrier. Yet as they struggled, their eyes witnessed a raging wave of burning flames consume everything outside their barrier for miles upon miles. Forests, stones, water, corpses, and even wounded enemy troops. Everything was turned to ash in an instant as the destruction rained down upon the land. The earth was torn apart, and everyone's eyes widened when the distant mountains rumbled before crumbling into dust. Nobody could recollect how long that rain of death and destruction lasted before it stopped once and for all. The blinding light vanished, and the rumbling across the earth died down slowly. Fires still raged in all directions as a witness to the apocalypse the Kiri warriors had just survived. The entire area was covered in smoke and ash as the clones suddenly disappeared, making the barrier protecting Mangetsu's squad vanish. A solid gust of wind was unleashed by that sudden collapse that cleared some of the smoke and ash in the area. Mei's eyes widened when she and her squad found themselves standing atop a tiny patch of land that stood tall and proud amongst a crater nearly 100 feet deep. They were all surprised when Naruto appeared beside them in a flash and nearly fell off the edge until Amuri and Jinpachi caught him. The blonde was panting harshly, and looked to be nearly dead of exhaustion. "Commander." "Retreat," now whispered Naruto in alarm, a warning look burning in his eyes, which were no longer red and were instead sporting his natural eye color. "But the mission is still not complete, and you slaughtered the enemy forces. We still have a chance," argued Mangetsu. They hadn't came this far, took all the risks they had only to return home without killing their prime target. Not against him. Before any of them could question the man as to the meaning behind his words, another strong gust of wind blew across the entire area. Every Kiri warrior had to use all their chakra in order to keep their legs rooted to their tiny patch of land unless they wanted to fall straight into that large crater due to the sheer force in the air itself. Their vision completely cleared as the smoke and ash vanished from the entire area. They all saw a man standing on the edge of the crater on the far side, casually looking at them. "You dance well, boy,"